Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of art. It's the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, coming to you from the 40 West Arts District in Lakewood, Colorado. And joining me from his art bat cave in Rapid City, South Dakota, my friend and partner. You know him as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, the one and only Wes Brown.
Hey, Todd, how you doing, man? You're my Robin to my Batman. Love it.
I love that you just said that, because I was thinking to myself, you have this bat cave now where you do your recording, where we interview people. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if he has one of those poles. Remember the old Batman show? Yeah, with Adam West.
Yeah.
God, I love that show.
It's right through that little door there. It comes from my master bedroom where the magic happens. And I just jump on the pole and slide down. And then I'm ready for any kind of crazy artwork stuff that you bring. So we're good.
I was thinking that you should be making an entrance every single time.
There we go.
You know, not just jumping on, but, you know, if people could see you, it'd be great if you were like sliding down that pole.
There you go. There you go. They might get the wrong impression, though, that I do pole dancing on the side, which is something nobody would want to see.
And this is what I was thinking to myself, too. Like, you're always trying to come up with, you know, like how to be comfortable in your latter years when you retire. And I was thinking to myself, this could be the key to your fans only page.
There you go. Yeah.
You go take some pole dancing classes, and then you have your own fans only page. And
that's good.
And I can assure you that, you know, having children and the things that they show me on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff, there's definitely somebody out there that would pay to watch that.
There's an audience for everybody, isn't there?
There is. If there's people watching other people play video games or paying to watch other people eat food, I think there's a place for you and pole dancing, Wes Brown.
Yeah, if you ever want to see some crazy stuff, just go on TikTok Live, and it'll take you all over the world seeing silly things from people trying to sleep and people making money. Yeah, it's crazy. So, but anyway, that's an idea. I'll think about it.
You should. My son came to me not too long ago, and he said, my boss just made $5 off, or maybe it was $20 off TikTok. And I was like, what does he do? And he's like, he films himself working out. And I said, what? People actually pay this guy to watch him work out.
Right.
Like, it just I couldn't even process that.
I spent a little bit of time on TikTok. This has probably been a year or so ago. During the pandemic, I was on it all the time because I needed entertainment, right? But this was just, I kind of happened on the whole TikTok live thing, and I started scrolling. It was just weird stuff, and people cooking, people just shooting the breeze, answering questions, you know, and it was everything from young girls and boys to complete adults to families it was interesting. Yeah, people will watch anything. And then there's a trick I don't know how it works, but there's a trick where you can get money and they send you things, and yeah, it's a whole thing. But anyway.
Yeah, they can like gift you things.
Right.
I'm like, who does that?
I don't know. A lot of people.
If you just want to burn dollar bills, I'll send you my address and you can just send the money to me.
Right.
We're doing this all wrong, I think.
I think so too.
But anyway. You're the TikTok guru, so
yeah, but I haven't made any. I'm just like a voyeur of TikTok.
That's what the exact word I was going to use. Well, you need to break out of that, man.
We're going to find out if our guest does any kind of TikTok with her art or anything.
That's definitely a good question.
We'll do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get to this.
All right, my friend.
We want to remind everyone that Art and Ag is back. It's Art and Ag 2023. Fleischer Family Farm, in conjunction with the Tenant Podcast, present a one-day art event Saturday, September 9th from 10 to 5. Come join us out at the farm located at 2005 South Zephyr Court here in Lakewood, Colorado, in the heart of the Southern Gables neighborhood. Experience this extraordinary organic farm, buy some farm fresh produce, check out beautiful art, and support local artists. Check out our social media for more details. And in the meantime, check out the Fleischer Family Farm website at fleischerfamilyfarm.com and find them on Facebook at the Fleischer Family Farm. We will release the roster of artists that we have lined up via our social media this week. So look for that. And I'm excited. Are you, Wes?
I'm just always excited. And I'm really excited for today. We're going back to my home state. So I'm looking forward to that.
Right on. All right. We are super stoked to talk with our next guest. We've been following her for a little while on social media, on her Instagram. You can check out her exquisite work at her website, GinaTeichert.com, and follow her on Instagram at Gina Teichert. Teichert is Teichert. Gina, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh,
Thanks
it's great to see you. Thank you. I've been spending a lot of time this morning looking at your stuff on Instagram. And so do you TikTok?
You know, it's funny that you say that because I thought I should get on the wave. And so I put a few painting time-lapse videos up a couple years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. I had the unfortunate handle, though, of being the crypto cowgirl, and then crypto crashed. And so now I have this really cringy handle.
I think that's all right. I think crypto hasn't gone away. So the title might serve you well in the long term. We'll see, right?
Yeah, well, I thought it should be a good placeholder in case I get into the NFT space or something, which I have not done. But I thought crypto cowgirl, I like the alliteration. You know, it's tech and cowboy stuff. But yeah, anyway, I don't TikTok much. I did 1 or 2 time-lapse videos, and that's about it.
Yeah. And it's a lot of work. I'm granted, once again, I said I don't create TikToks, but I definitely consume them periodically, not as much as I had the past couple of years, but every now and then I get on and check out things because there's a lot of funny stuff. Now there's a lot of other weird stuff on there. So it's everything, right?
It is. Well, and I'm kind of the Instagram generation, and everyone kind of convinces you to jump off onto a new platform. And I'm like, well, maybe just hold my footing on this one. I've been here for 12 years or something. Maybe I just stick to Instagram and just admit I was born in the 80s.
There you go. And I appreciate the fact, because I was watching some this morning while I was having my morning coffee in the backyard, and I was looking at some of your time lapse of your drawings, and how you're sketching and then painting, and how the artwork comes alive from your the time lapse. And coming from somebody that doesn't paint, it's really interesting to watch because I'm always in awe of people's skills. So thanks for sharing those because they're really interesting.
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, I hate to say it, everybody's got to figure out some way to connect with people, and just a static photo of a painting is pretty dry. I think people like to see a little more process. So for anything, social media has given us more of a window into people's work and their, how they actually do the work.
Yeah.
So Gina, tell our listeners where you are currently based.
Yeah, I live in rural Napa County, California. So I kind of joke that we're on the low rent side of Napa County. We're not in the Napa Valley. We're about 30 minutes from the Napa Valley. So, poor artists can still afford to live here, keep a couple horses, couple dogs, a little bit of land, I'd say it's kind of the best of both worlds. I was in San Francisco for 13 years. But I also grew up in the cattle industry, like in rural Nevada for the most part. So some of my friends here are like, oh my gosh, are you doing okay? You're like way out there in the wilderness. What about the snakes and things? And I'm like, girl, there's like brie at the supermarket here and like really good produce. I think I'm going to be okay. So you don't really know what it's like to live in a truly rural place until you're like on the really low tier of like what kind of produce comes to your grocery store. I honestly, I have to stay in like kind of the bougie parts of the world because I'm not going back to bad lettuce.
So let's talk about growing up in Nevada. Whereabouts were you in Nevada?
Yeah, so I grew up in Elko County, Nevada. For those of you who don't know where that is, that's the northeastern corner. So kind of where it meets Idaho and Utah. I grew up in a place called Ruby Valley, which is a really rural community, about 60 miles to the nearest town for groceries and gas and all of that, and terrible lettuce when you get there. But it was a really gorgeous place, super alpine. They call it the high desert. So, really interesting geological and environmental changes happened really quickly there. So our valley was about 6,000 feet. The mountains nearby were, 10-ish. So you had a lot of like snowpack and runoff and these beautiful native meadows and things. And then it turned into sagebrush, and then it turned into alkali. And then a few miles later, you're in like the place that, kind of stymied the Donner Party. This valley is actually known for being part of what put the Donner Party on their path. So Hastings Cutoff, which was a place Hastings himself had never been, went through this valley, and it was the pretty horrible part of the valley that was very dry and full of sulfury springs and places called Badwater and Dead Horse and Rattlesnake Ridge.
So were you a ranch girl growing up?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. My dad's in the cattle industry. He had his own herd of cattle. He was breeding bulls, and also sometimes managing other people's properties. So we moved around kind of that region a little bit growing up. I was actually born in central Utah, and we moved, I don't know, I think I was 4 or 5 when we moved from there, but still have a lot of family out there as well. But yeah, my dad's in beef cattle. So that's been, the lifestyle, I guess. So I grew up with horses and, some chores and things. So got away from that as soon as I could.
It's actual hard work, so yeah, I got family that still ranches and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of hard work, and but it's honest work. Thank God for people that raise cows, because I love my hamburger.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a wonderful way to grow up, and it's a great place to have a young family and all of that sort of thing. But about the time I was 14, I was like, okay, I'm going to want a little more out of life. I don't mean like a mall.
And I love Southern Utah and Central Utah, but I haven't spent a lot of time in Nevada. So I think I want to go and spend some time there, drive through it, and spend a couple days traveling through and just check it out, because it seems like it's a really neat place. And I do like the kind of the desolate kind of high desert kind of look anyway. So so I'm gonna have to spend some time there.
My recommendation is to take Highway 50 if you do. Highway 50 cuts straight through the center of Nevada, and there are these huge north-south mountain ranges all through Nevada, but these epic valleys and epic views. They call it the loneliest highway in America. So make sure you gas up, even when it's $3 over market price. It's best extra $20 you spent. But it's so gorgeous. And people say like, oh, Nevada's so ugly because they drove down I-80. Well, yeah, they always put freeways in kind of the ugliest parts, right? Like if your idea of what California looks like is from I-5, California's not that pretty either. But Highway 50 really slices through some of the best stuff, and you end up in Lake Tahoe, and it's a gorgeous drive.
And one more thing since we're talking about places, so talk about your valley. What does it look like? What's the makeup?
Yeah, well, so I'm in Pope Valley, California, which is about half an hour from St. Helena or Calistoga, which is kind of the northern end of the Napa Valley. So a lot of the big wineries and things, they're there. My husband works in St. Helena, so that's kind of town to us. But the valley itself is mostly grasslands, big, tall native oaks. We have what they call blue oaks, which are an interesting oak. The trees on our property are 500-700 years old. They're amazing. So it's quite open where we're at. As you get up into the hills, it's more kind of mixed in different kind of conifers and other things. There's actually redwoods. My in-laws live about 10 miles up the hill from us, and they have redwoods, but we're in a much hotter, drier, more exposed part of the valley. Really friendly to snakes, lots of snakes around here. But other than that, yeah, it's kind of, I guess, what you'd consider like a classic California landscape. So if you were a really romantic young art student, you'd definitely be doing this like golden backlit grassy hill thing, which I'll admit I've dabbled in for sure. But it's exactly the kind of landscape you imagine when you think of like golden hills of California.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. I'm a SoCal guy. I was born in Orange County and lived there back in the 80s and moved away. But and I didn't spend a whole lot of time as a child. My dad was in the Marine Corps, so California always has a kind of a special place in my heart, just because you're born there, and I spent early adulthood there, so it was kind of fun. But I haven't spent a lot of time in Northern California either. And I know that's just a gorgeous place. So on my bucket list.
If you're into wine also, we have a lot of vineyards in our backyard. There aren't very many wineries proper with kind of a tourist aspect or, a service aspect in this valley. But they grow a lot of the fruit that goes into other wineries. So it's beautiful. I think that it's easy to fall into that trap of like the vine painters. I've tried pretty hard not to like take on like, I'm going to paint rows and rows of vines. Like no shade to anybody who does that, but like it's very easy to kind of be overly influenced by what's going on around you and kind of play into that a little bit. So I think as an artist, it's important to kind of figure out like what's true to you also, and where you live is part of it, but it's only part of it. So
we're glad what you're painting, because I'll speak for Todd too. We both love your work, and it's amazing. So I'm glad you're not just painting grapevines and grapes, the touch of the South or the West, and I love that. So
thank you.
What is the art scene and community like there where you live?
It's kind of interesting. I've been up here about 3 years, I guess. I moved here in 2020, and I'm still kind of figuring it out. I would say there's a little bit of that sort of cottage touristy industry where, the vine painters and things that are a little bit more subject matter that's really interesting to people who already love the Napa Valley and love this landscape. So there are a few little galleries in town that kind of service that side of the art world. But as far as kind of a true community, I'm still figuring it out. There are a few younger people, I would say, doing ceramics, or, there's a like burners, there's quite a big Burning Man contingent here. So those people are like a little bit more out there as far as the materials they use or their techniques. So I wouldn't say that I found like a true peer group, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it's actually more interesting to engage with people with really different ideas and, be challenged a little bit. But I wouldn't say there's one whole art community here. So for me, I've got San Francisco, which I lived in for a long time. Many of the people I went to school with are still showing there. So I'd say that's probably like my core art community. And also, I'm not that far from Sacramento. I'm kind of honestly about equidistant from Sacramento and San Francisco. So I'm kind of trying to understand what's going on in Sacramento as well, and maybe, engage with some of the arts organizations there.
Well, it sounds like you're in a good place, being kind of close to two different art communities, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the pandemic really helped me. Of all the things that, the silver linings that would have come out of that, I'm engaging, obviously, things like this with you guys, but like with the global art community and the Western art community, and being in the middle of nowhere 10 years ago even would have been like a death sentence for a career. So I think that us kind of going into a more remote, decentralized art world has been really useful for those of us who don't live in, New York.
Absolutely. How long have you lived in Napa?
About 3 years. So I was kind of back and forth in 2020. I still had my apartment in San Francisco, which I call my overpriced storage unit. My husband and I had got engaged like right before the pandemic. So I was kind of coming back and forth. He was living up here. And then when the lockdown happened, I was just sort of like, nope, not going back to San Francisco. So I spent a lot of 2020 up here. We got married in the fall of 2020, and I got rid of my place there. So I've officially been here almost 3 years.
Nice. And you come from a large family? You have a lot of siblings?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm one of 7 kids. My dad had this joke of like, why hire help when you can breed them?
Right.
I'm not sure that as an economic strategy, it was actually that good.
But child labor is free.
Yeah, I'd probably rather just hire some people, though, because kids do get expensive, especially those that want to go to art school. So,
Right.
But yeah, I'm one of 7. I'm exactly the middle of 7. So 4 girls, 3 boys. My mother was pregnant from like 1978 to 1992, just solid.
So do you have middle child syndrome?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like it is 100% me. And whatever, sort of attributes you want to pin on that, like I'll accept them. Yeah.
When you grow up in a big family, and I know this because my wife comes from a large family as well, if you want attention, man, you got to vie for it. You got to like make yourself known, right?
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm kind of a showboat. When I got involved in the entertainment industry, it was literally like, look at me, and I'm like, I spent my whole life trying to get people to look at me.
This journey with art, like a lot of artists, started at an early age for you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. I was always kind of one of the more artistic kids in our family. My sister Callie also is an artist. But yeah, I was drawing and things. Like I remember in kindergarten being like the kid that was good at drawing horses. So all the kids would bring their like, their rainbow paintings or whatever to me to like install a horse in. So I got an idea of the like artist patron thing. I don't think they understood the exchange that was necessary there. I didn't get any like lunch snacks or anything. I wasn't getting tips, but I was drawing horses into other people's work for them when I was a kid. So
a collaborative effort in the early art world of your art journey.
Exactly. Yeah. But it was fun for me. it's a relatively inexpensive thing to do, especially when you're not using oil paint and big canvases and things. As a kid, I just give me a pack of printer paper. I still prefer printer paper, like very cheap paper, because then it's not like precious. If it's like in a moleskin, all bound and nice, I'm like, oh no, they're going to see this, posterity, but like if it's just a piece of printer paper, my best work happens on something that like could be thrown away if it fails.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
I read that you in the 3rd grade had a painting of yours make it into National Geographic Kids. Is that correct?
So this is really my breakthrough when I realized I'm going to be a genius. I don't know if you guys remember this, but in the 90s, there was a morning show, like during cartoons or something, just on broadcast TV that National Geographic did. It was National Geographic Kids. And at the end of the episode, there was just a screen that popped up that said like art contest, submit your wildlife art to this. So, I mean, literally, you don't take a photo of it and, email it. This is like 1994. You send them your painting in an envelope. Anyway, which I did. I had this tiger painting that was, probably painted from a reference from National Geographic. So it got really meta really fast. But where else was I going to get a picture of a tiger? We didn't even have the internet, So I painted this tiger. I mailed it in. They photographed it or whatever, and they actually put it up like a couple weeks later. It was on like Saturday morning cartoons, National Geographic, and they sent me like a fanny pack and all sorts of like swag that said National Geographic. Like it was my big break. Like, yeah, from then I was like, oh yeah, I got this.
That's awesome. I love that.
Right on. That's pretty cool to get that kind of validation so young. I mean, obviously you had validation from your peers at school, but to have some outside large entity like National Geographic recognize your artwork, that's really cool.
Yeah, even now I'd like National Geographic to recognize my artwork.
That's awesome.
Was your family very encouraging when it came to your interest in art?
Yeah, totally. Interestingly enough, my dad's grandmother, so my great grandmother, was a painter. Her name was Minerva Teichert, but I think it was really influential on him that, seeing what, I don't know, sort of value being an artist can bring to someone's life. And, he grew up next to her on the same ranch, and she's painting and, like butchering chickens and raising kids. And like, so anytime I ever have excuses as to like why I can't get my work done, I remember I don't have like a whole farm. I don't have like a family to feed, I got a couple dogs, but like life's pretty easy. But for my dad, I think growing up around her, he also had a pretty good idea of what the struggle was going to be like, because he was like, party to some of her biggest career disappointments as well. She was really a prolific, accomplished painter, but like that didn't really translate into financial success. So I think I came into it a little bit more eyes open with kind of that knowledge. But I think my dad probably did want me to be an artist. Like, I don't know, somebody's got to carry that like family torch. He used to bring bones home for me all the time. I'm still kind of a skull collector. But at the time, I'm 10 or something. I didn't really know what to do with them. So I tried painting on them, which not for me, especially when they're old, kind of sun bleached, like chalky ones from the field. Like it just soaks up your paint. I'm sure I had like tempera or something, so it was like not the right deal. So I'm still painting bones. I'm just painting pictures of bones as opposed to painting directly on them. But yeah, I think my dad always kind of like wanted to, I don't know. He wanted to push me in that direction a little bit. So I think I already had the interest, but it felt good to get, to be validated in that, I guess.
So did you grow up with this grandmother, or did you just have art in your house?
Yeah, we had art in our house from her. She passed away before I was born. So this is my dad's grandmother, my great grandmother. But, when people ask me like, who was the first artist you ever admired, I would say it was Minerva Teichert, because it was the first artist I ever knew. She was really prolific kind of in the Western like pioneer sort of space. So we had a lot of paintings of like cattle drives and, that sort of thing, like chuck wagony kind of scenes and stuff. So yeah, as far as like compositions as well, they were really involved, like 20 figures in a painting or something. So I think that was interesting to me to see someone doing work at such a high level, especially in the Western genre or with Western subject matter.
And your family has been part of the West and has a true Western story, like generations of your family. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were the kind of people that went west every time there was a new west to go to. So, I had some ancestors in, I don't know, North Carolina or Virginia or something in the 16 and 1700s. And then they go to Kentucky, and then they go to Missouri, and then they go to Nebraska, and then they go to Utah, Wyoming, Idaho. So a lot of my family settled what is now kind of was the Utah territories, but Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, that kind of little zone. But yeah, a lot of my family still lives out there, but yeah, they were some of the first.
That's amazing. I love that story. My family's kind of the same way. Went from, the East Coast and then like to Illinois, Iowa, then Kansas and Wyoming from my mom's side. So yeah, I totally relate to what your family's background. It's amazing. I love that frontier thing and that sense of discovery. And I have that too. And obviously you probably do as well, is that I'm always looking forward to what's on the other side of the next hill, so that's really cool.
Well, I don't know if they were brave or they were nuts. Like what kind of an idea was this? Like, okay, I'm going to go take this journey based on a pamphlet or like a rumor. I'm not even going to get on like a train line. I don't know where it goes to, And here these people are like, I'm going to pack all my stuff up into a wagon and just like go to some place this guy like wrote a little pamphlet about.
Right.
I don't know. Brave, strong, cool, idiots. I don't know. However you want to look at it, probably a mixture of all of these.
Takes a little bit of everything, I think, there. A little craziness and a lot of bravery and courage and tenacity. So
totally.
Well, it definitely sounds like that's part of your DNA because you've had a lot of interesting experiences for someone that grew up in a pretty rural area, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. And like I said, I wouldn't get on a train line that I didn't know where it go to. That's a lie. I wouldn't do that now. I'm not saying I haven't done that. Many of my experiences when I first kind of started living in cities and things were ridiculously dumb. I mean, the first time I went to Los Angeles, I had like a beat up Oldsmobile Cutlass and a paper map. And I was like gonna meet a friend at an address. And I didn't even have a cell phone. I just like drove there, and I just like landed in Los Angeles and like pulled over at a coffee shop and used a payphone to be like, hey, I made it. Come get me. I do that now to drive like 3 states away without having any idea where you're going or like a cell phone or a map or, like Google Maps. It was insane. So I won't say I'm a pioneer. I was more to the idiot side of things.
But you definitely sound like you've always been very independent.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because when you grow up in a big family, you're kind of codependent in a lot of ways, but also you really need to figure out how to be an individual. So I think especially for middle children, if we're going to lay into that stereotype, you need to figure out how to, have your own identity and some of those things. So I think that like cultivating your own interests or, taking a different path in life was a big part for me of trying to just figure out who I am, like absent this Teichert thing. I always joke that like for me, by the time I got into high school or I got into 4-H or something, I was just another one of the Weasleys, and so I just kind of like, oh man, there'd been 4 ahead of me already. If like a track coach calls you Teichert, it's kind of an insult, I'm like, oh man, they don't even know my first name. I'm just another one of those Weasleys.
Everybody that has looked at the episode notes already and heard you speak a little bit knows that your themes that you work with are very Western, but take a moment and talk about your practice and what you do, what mediums you work in.
Yeah. So I'm an oil painter for the most part. I would say I'm interested in whatever material gets you across the finish line. So I'm not exclusively an oil painter. If there's some sort of project that's better served with charcoal or screen print or spray paint. I've tried a lot of different things over the years, but I would say kind of my fine art practice that I'm really focusing on right now, oil on canvas, kind of moving into larger scale stuff right now that I have a designated space. It's pretty cool. It's still like a spare room in our house, but it's a pretty good spare room. So I'm feeling spoiled there. So yeah, working into a little bit larger format things. This series I'm working on for a show this October in Los Angeles, kind of 4 feet, 3 feet, like getting up there. A lot of the shows that I've done the past couple of years have been small works shows, and they've been kind of far flung. They've been in Texas, they've been in Colorado, they've been in Wyoming. So something that you can ship makes a lot more sense. I mean, anybody who knows what it costs to ship art just like cringes when you're like, oh my gosh, especially if you get over like 40 inches or something. It just becomes insanely expensive. So showing in California, I'm able to drive the work there myself. So I'm really able to scale up for this. As far as subject matter is concerned, I'm really kind of honing in on almost what I'd call like a desert noir or a Western noir. I really like the Western sort of iconography. I love the old spaghetti Westerns, Sergio Leone, or, some newer directors, say Robert Rodriguez or Tarantino, that kind of like moody, like bad bitch kind of vibe. So I'm really selecting models that kind of embody some of that and kind of figuring out ways to, I don't know, make some sort of hybrid or I don't know, something that feels true to like all versions of me. So, I'm not just this rural kid who grew up in ranching, and I'm not just this person who, worked in the fashion industry and lived in major cities. Like I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of include all of those together in the same practice.
Makes total sense. I mean, this is all your life experience. So you're bringing all these different scenarios into what you do, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge, and I think that's the challenge for any artist is to figure out how to, show the truest version of themselves. Some of the earlier work that I had done was a little bit more, I guess, tame. Another word is boring. Some of it was kind of, I don't know, just fine, just kind of garden variety stuff. And as I'm doing things that are a little bit more conceptual or a little bit edgier, people who know me really well, my sister or my college roommate or people are reaching out to me and be like, yes, this feels like you. This is what was missing, like not that other stuff wasn't bad, but like it wasn't all of you. So that's kind of raw sometimes too, for you to be like, oh, I'm going to put all of myself into something. That's scary. So I think that there is some vulnerability and maybe a little bit of like, I don't know, trial and error involved in figuring out what kind of artistic voice you want to have. And I think for me, that's still evolving, but I feel like I'm getting a lot closer.
Yeah, I was going to ask it about your artistic voice. And so you're starting to hone in on it. How long is it taking you to like really discover like, oh, this is it? And maybe it doesn't come like overnight. It's just something that slowly evolves.
I was going to say 37 years. That's how long it's taken. And I think that maybe even the past, 6 months, things have really started to come together for me. I think as you kind of try things out and you're like, okay, I really liked what this part of this painting or this concept here. So for me, it's still evolving. And I think I'm going to reserve the right to always evolve. I don't think you have to stay in the same subject matter or the same style forever. But I think what I want to do personally is make sure that there's like a visual signature of some sort. So, paint application or, kind of the graphic design elements of the paintings. Even if I'm painting a different subject matter, I still want it to kind of feel like me as a painter in execution. So I think that's also a tool I can use is kind of developing that, technical signature so that if I do want to explore different concepts, it still all looks like I painted it. And I'm not some crazy person that just like does a capsule collection of something over here and it's completely different than the last thing that I did. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think if you're going to try to participate in commerce, it's helpful to have a little bit of a visual voice or brand.
Absolutely. And I definitely get that feel looking at your work, even though you explore different subject matter. And we talk about this all the time. That's one of the things I love about what you do is because I can see that exploration. That to me, when I'm looking at an artist's body of work, I want to see that exploration going on.
Thank you.
When did you decide to go to art school? Because I know that you attended the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. Was that a little bit after high school or did that happen right after high school?
Yeah, so I guess I decided I wanted to go to art school pretty early on. The challenging part, refer back to cattle ranching, 7 kids, was the economics of it. So yeah, I actually went a little bit later. I'd gone to a few different schools. I had some fits and starts, but I got to the Academy of Art in San Francisco in 2008. So I was not a true freshman. I was 22. I had taken some time off to work before that. I'd taken a few classes here and there, but not enough to like amass any credits of, any importance. But yeah, I mean, it's incredibly expensive. That was the hurdle for me being from a really small town. Like I worked at a coffee shop and a casino trying to like save enough money to move. And, I think some of those real physical hurdles, I wouldn't say held me back. I don't know. Once again, that all kind of goes into your story. And I think I was much more prepared to be a good student or really like care and know what I wanted out of it by the time I got there. Because it was my money and my sacrifice and my time. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get everything out of this.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference too. I went to college later too, and it really forces you to focus. I didn't have that financial support. So I think that's important. How does your years in art school kind of inform you today? I mean, obviously technique maybe, but what kind of experience did you have that really informs you today?
Well, the interesting thing about the Academy of Art is it's the most traditional school in the Bay Area for sure, and maybe all of California, as far as like they're a technique driven school. You know, they pump out a lot of illustrators and animators and things that are just like so tight, you know, like when it comes to drawing and painting, that's what they do. They teach you how to do that. So I think just from a technical standpoint, like I learned the rules of materials, you know, and the best practices of achieving what you wanted to achieve visually. I think where they kind of fell short was on the conceptual side of business, of course. I don't think any art school teaches you business. They should, every single one. But I think where, you know, maybe even like Cal Arts or something in Southern California, they're very conceptual. Academy of Art really did not have much going on in that department. So some of that I had to kind of develop on my own and kind of, you know, through, I don't know, reading a lot, art magazines, you know, podcasts, talking to peers, seeing shows, going to the big shows. You know, I've been to like the Armory show in New York and really kind of seeing how other artists are, I don't know, bundling a couple of these things. You know, the aesthetic's always the first thing you notice, right? But the conceptual side can be really fun. So for me, I think that's still kind of an ongoing part of the journey, but I don't think school prepared me for that. But what it did prepare me for is being able to get my ideas out in a, you know, cohesive, meaningful, clear way once I figured out what I want to paint. Hard part is figuring out what to paint. They teach you how to paint, not what to paint.
So how do you approach it now with the creative side, the concept side?
I'd say it's still a little bit of a mixture of kind of, you know, being influenced by other media and things. I mentioned I worked in the fashion industry as a model for a long time. So I think photography has been really important to me as far as just seeing, I don't know, visual concepts like realized. So, you know, being on set and kind of seeing how the lighting and the makeup and the wardrobe and the, you know, the shapes you make with your body, all of those kind of things kind of come together. So I'm really very influenced by photography. I wouldn't say I'm a great photographer, but I do shoot most of my own references. So I'm lucky to have a lot of beautiful friends that will work for free because I don't have a budget really to, book real models, but my friends are real models. So that's been great to be able to kind of come up with some mood board. You know, I have a lot of vintage clothes and other kind of interesting things. So really kind of producing my own photo shoot, shooting it, and then kind of using those reference images as like a jumping off point. I don't feel really bound to them that I have to, you know, completely perfectly recreate those because what's the point? I may as well just be a photographer. But it's a really good kind of genesis for what I'm gonna do. So that's kind of how it's been happening lately, and I think I'm gonna stick with it. It feels good. It feels right. Also, having access to great models is something that not every artist has. So I gotta, you know, take the edge where I've got it.
That's right. That's amazing in itself. And then on your Instagram, I noticed that you do a lot of sketchbooks and like almost like storyboards almost. Was that something you developed in art school, or is that something that you started when you were a child?
Yeah, I would say doing thumbnails in particular is something they really emphasized in school. You know, just making sure you got the figure on the right part of the canvas. So once again, I mentioned I like cheap paper. You know, I really do newsprint or like printer paper. I work out all my ideas beforehand, and sometimes I wish those were the final product. It's like, oh, this had a little energy and a little gesture that I didn't get in the later work. But yeah, I think for that, literally just putting the figure in the right spot on the canvas is so important. You know, how many times is like a younger artist or an amateur artist like started and really loved that eye they were drawing, but like it's not in the right spot. And then they've got this decision tree. Do I erase this? Do I like move the whole thing to match this beautiful eye with the eyelashes? Like, I think that's something that happens a lot. So thinking about it more holistically and being like, okay, this is an entire composition. Let's make sure everything compositionally is lined out. And I'll admit, I design a lot in progress. It's probably one of my bigger faults, but it also kind of, I don't know, there's a little danger in it. I like it. So sometimes I do actually have to make major changes in the middle of a painting, and I'm like, oops.
So the one thing like I said, I was looking at your Instagram with the sketches, and there was a number of them that I was like, oh my God, I would love to own that. Just the raw sketch. There was something, obviously you're very talented, and they were just beautiful in their own right. And so do you ever sell those, or?
I haven't really, there's not a huge market for works on paper, but sometimes like if somebody commissions a painting, I'll give them the sketches that were kind of the pre-work for their painting. Sometimes they'll go out and get those framed. But yeah, they're just stacked up in my office. I'll mail you one after this.
Okay. I'll give you my address after that. No, I do. I thought there was a few of them that I was just like, oh my God, these are very awesome in their own right. Yeah. I would definitely frame them and hang them up. That's for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I'm glad you spoke to your experience as a model and what that brings, how that has informed what you do as a painter. Do you feel like you got a good foundation from the Academy of Art?
I did. I think that's what they do best. They are a foundational school. They teach you to draw and paint 6 or 8 hours a day for 4 years. So if you come out of there and you can't draw and paint, it's your fault. Every time I meet somebody that's like, oh, I can only do a stick figure, I was like, because you haven't put the hours in yet. You may not have great ideas. I think there are a couple elements that go into being an artist, and the technical side is part of it, and it's incredibly important. But anybody can cultivate that. It's like a sport. You may not become like an NFL superstar, but if you practice football every day, 8 hours a day for 4 years, you'd get better. So I think that was what they do. They kind of put you through the machine. I mean, I remember getting so tired. My shoulder would get so tired from drawing, but they'd have a free drawing workshop in the evenings after class. So I've already been drawing for 6 hours. And then there's a free class at night. I'm trying to extract every bit of value I can from this overpriced tuition. So I go to the evening workshop and I learned to draw left-handed in the evening, because it didn't matter anyway. It wasn't for a grade, but I would draw left-handed for those 4 hours in the evening because my right shoulder was so dead.
That's amazing though. I mean, just think, have you ever carried that on where you pick up stuff on and use your left side? Because it's got to have a different feel to it, right?
It does. I would say I wouldn't do it for detail work or something, but I try to make lefty pull his own weight around here if I'm sizing a canvas or doing some, bigger stuff, put him to work.
Do you feel like that it was a double-edged sword, not having the conceptual part of what the university offered as far as your instructors, really teaching you those conceptual things, that it allowed you, kind of freed you up to figure out what your voice is and where you're going as an artist?
Yeah, I would say it's some of both. I wish I would have been taught to think, and I don't know if you can teach people to think. So I think when it comes to challenging people and having more intellectual discourse, certain types of art education really lean into that, almost like a philosophy degree, define your terms and defend your work. Critiques in class can be really intimidating because sometimes they really go for it and they make you get kind of open and raw in front of the class, which we did some of that. I had a couple of teachers that I would say were a little bit better, later on in the education as well. Once you've learned how to, literally get your ideas out, then kind of analyzing whether or not they're good ideas. I have this own little rubric I use for myself was, what were you trying to achieve? Did you achieve it? And the one that's the kicker, was it worth doing? And sometimes I don't always pass the third query there, was it worth doing? So I'm glad that what am I trying to achieve and am I able to achieve it? I'm getting there. That's cool. But I really do wish that I had a little bit more of that when I was younger. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not sitting here living in resentment. I think it's cool that I've been forced to explore some of that on my own through reading and documentaries and art podcasts and just talking to other artists and, kind of creating an intellectual discourse through other channels. So I think that the fact that everything's digital now is super helpful, that I really am able to connect with people who have interesting practices and live somewhere else than me.
It is pretty fantastic, the age we live in and all the tools that we have available that, we didn't have previous. I mean, before you would have had to, just go to the library and check out a bunch of books and kind of look at artwork that way, right? But now you're just a few clicks away from exploring a whole different world, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, I still love books as a great way of just like really diving in on a subject matter. My grandmother gave me some Georgia O'Keeffe books for Christmas a couple years ago, and I read coffee table books cover to cover. And they were so interesting. And I think sometimes we forget that coffee table books have really great prose. They're academics that are putting these together, these monographs or whatever. But I found those really interesting as far as kind of her life story and maybe her journey through the art world, which in a lot of ways I do see some parallels. She had to go to a major city and really had to be there and participate in the scene at least sometimes in order to exist, in comparison to my great grandmother, who's exactly the same age. I think they were born like a year apart. She lived in Wyoming on a ranch and had kids and never went to New York again after art school to go kind of glad hand or whatever you need to do, or sleep with the right art dealers. But like her stuff was relatively unknown in her age because she wasn't able to play the game. And so you look at O'Keeffe, who had a great life, kind of living out in a rural way, but like she also still engaged with the real art world, the big art world. And I think that's kind of an interesting lesson for me, not living in the city now. Is like, you got to dip a toe in every once in a while, or they're not going to know you exist.
And Georgia O'Keeffe was a world traveler. I mean, she traveled to, I can't even remember. We were just in New Mexico a week ago, and we didn't go to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, but Abiquiu, they have a little museum there, and they had a bunch of stuff from all her travels on display and talked about how much she loved traveling, which is something that, you yourself have experienced quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say I don't do as much as I used to, at least outside of the US, kind of being on the art circuit within the Western genre the past few years has been keeping me somewhat like regionally focused. I teased my husband that it's sort of like being in a band, like your first year on tour. Like you're not going to make any money, but you really got to pound the pavement for like awareness. So, I'm going to like Cheyenne and Denver and Austin and Santa Fe. And, like fashion Gina, like 10, 15 years ago, was going to like Miami and Milan and Paris. So for me to be like, oh yeah, I'm just, hitting all the like third-rate size cities in America, it's kind of funny for me. But it's also really, I don't know, it's kind of cool because I really connect with the people when I'm there. We have a lot more in common generally.
I read that you graduated yourself. So let's talk about that. What does that mean? You graduated yourself from art school?
Graduated in quotation marks. And don't tell any of my former employers, because I wouldn't say that I ever lied about this, but I implied that I finished something. No, I just wasn't able to get all of the credits in the time that really mattered, because I was modeling at the time. So I'm gone a lot. So I'm in art school, but art school is incredibly expensive. You can't be a barista and pay for it. I mean, this is why the whole student debt thing is such a conversation now. I didn't take on more student debt at one point because I was just like, no, either I'm going to get what I can get out of this experience and, what I can pay for. So, I'm making a lot of money for a young kid as a model. It's hit and miss. And that's another thing that like a lot of people should know about both modeling and the art world is like, there are some high highs and some low lows. But I'm gone a lot. If I get booked for a job in Minneapolis tomorrow, I have to like just get on a plane. I don't get to tell my teacher, oh, hey, I'm not going to be able to present tomorrow. So I wasn't academic probation, but I always had teachers like one or two a semester that would be like, are you okay? Or is like everything all right? And I was like, yeah. Just take it or leave it. I'll be in class and I'll be an amazing student when I'm here and I'll do the work. I never like missed assignments, but I was gone a lot, and it wasn't always the sexiest job either. I did a lot of, at the time they called them catalogs. Now we're calling it e-commerce because it's all gone digital, but like for department stores and stuff, I'd fly to Durham, North Carolina and shoot a department store catalog for 2 days, paid my rent, paid my tuition, did a lot of good things. Did it make me a super famous supermodel? Nope. But it was better than, other forms of like wage labor as far as being able to extract the most amount of money out of the time you had invested. So that's a lot of hours as a barista, So I was able to commit to my art and to the class in what I considered a fair enough way. But yes, graduating myself, literally my cohort of people I started school with were technically graduating in the real form. And I thought, like, you know what? I was already a little bit older anyway. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I've gotten what I think I can get out of this program. So I just, retired from art school at the same time all my other friends were truly graduating. And I rented a studio in the Mission District in San Francisco, which was kind of like the hip, like up and coming, but super cutty, like arts district and a warehouse, and I just started practicing art. So that was for me. Like, I don't think you have to have a license to practice art, and I still don't. So I learned everything I was going to learn, I think, at least technically, as far as being able to communicate what was in my head onto a canvas. So graduated myself.
Well, and the cool thing is nobody's asking you like, can I see your degree, before you paint this painting for me or before I buy something, it's really irrelevant.
Yeah. It's not like surgery. I had a friend say the other day, doctors are the only people who shouldn't cheat on their tests.
Here's the interesting thing. We never ask our doctor, where did you fall in your, when you graduated? Where was your ranking in class? Were you number 1 or number 53? Nobody cares. Nobody asks. Maybe you should, but nobody does.
Well, you in South Dakota in Rapid City, you should probably be asking that question, Wes Brown.
Yeah. Well, I probably have a vet. They probably went to vet school. So.
Oh man.
Hopefully my doctor's not listening because she's okay.
But I think that's totally legitimate. And, like you said, nobody's ever asked you or inquired whether or not you have a degree in art per se or cares. What they care about is the quality of the work. As a photographer, nobody's asked me whether or not I went to art school or if I have a degree, which I do. I appreciated the whole graduating myself ideology because I was at that point myself in art school where I was like, you know what? I've gotten everything I can get out of this place. And if I don't make it through my portfolio review, I'm out. Like, I'm not incurring any more debt. I stopped going to portfolio class because I was not getting anything out of it. And so I just went off and did my own thing. And when it was time to turn in my portfolio, I think I had maybe 2-3 pieces proved. I just turned it in and I said, they're either going to pass me or they're not. I'd already won a scholarship. I'd carried a 4.0 pretty much all the way through art school. I was like, either way, I'm out of here. So I appreciate that thought of like, hey, I've gotten everything I can get out of this and I don't need to accrue any more debt. I'm going for it.
Yeah, good for you.
What made you decide to jump into the modeling world and do that? Did somebody see you somewhere and said, hey, I think you'd be a great model, or it was something you just pursued yourself?
Well, it's interesting because, I'd wanted to go to art school in some capacity, like through high school and things, when you're starting to figure out like, oh, how does this really look like as a career? You got your high school guidance counselors and all of those kind of people talking to you. So originally I thought I was going to be a fashion design major. I had really liked drawing and painting, but I was kind of under the impression that like maybe that wasn't a very good career. So I had a very quick stint, like less than a semester before I dropped out of a fashion design school at kind of like a funky little trade school. But I had been exposed to the fashion world a little bit through that. We'd gone to some, apparel trade shows and that kind of stuff, and I will say, honestly, growing up in Nevada, the sort of fashion model figure, the wafy, like Kate Moss figure, I did not know that was an okay way to look. Even I was not exposed to fashion in like, the high fashion sense. They were like pinup models and stuff. Like the boys that I liked in high school were like into Pam Anderson and, Carmen Electra and stuff. So I was seeing that body type really validated. And it wasn't until I got into bigger cities and started like interfacing with fashion people that I realized that like kind of the skinny, weird little farm girl I already was kind of cool. So that felt good to actually get actual validation for who I already was. But yeah, I just walked into an open call. I wouldn't say I was ever scouted. Some people get discovered or something. Like I kind of already knew I was interested. I'd done a few test shoots from, photographers that I had met online or whatever. This is kind of in the model mayhem era. If anybody remembers this, which is a total crapshoot. Parents, do not let your daughters shoot with strangers when they're like 19 and new in the big city. Like, luckily nothing super creepy ever happened to me, but it was totally possible. But I had a little bit of a portfolio, and I walked into sort of a mom and pop's agency with my book and like, hey, I want to be a model. So they're like, wow, your portfolio is shit. But okay, we'll help, groom you a little bit. So I worked with them for a little over a year, probably. Doing a lot of really cheesy commercial stuff. They were the kind of people that were like booking promo models for trade shows and events and things. Some commercials and, kind of cheesy, like smile next to somebody eating a chip full of salsa kind of stuff, but I got on camera experience. I understand kind of like the decorum of set and things. And I started building my book up. So when I moved to San Francisco in 2008, there was actually Ford Models had an office there, which has since closed. But at the time, I just literally walked into Ford during an open call and had my kind of mediocre small town model portfolio and just walked in and said, I want to sign with Ford Models. And they signed me.
Wow. That's amazing. And validating in its own right itself, because that's so huge.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like Ford's a brand, right? Some little mom and pop agency can get you some work, but like you're not with a juggernaut. And there are pros and cons to being with bigger agencies and smaller agencies. And I'm sure it'll inform me a lot when I actually try to get representation through galleries. Is like, hey, I have been represented before, maybe a different, medium, but like I know what this relationship can look like when it's good, and I know what it can look like when it's not working for you. So I feel armed with that kind of knowledge. Puts me in a little bit of a different footing, I guess, than some other artists.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have that real life experience, and you've dealt with, contracts and like you said, having somebody that represents you. So going in with already having that idea or that experience, you could probably suss out pretty quickly whether or not it's going to be a good fit, right?
Yeah, well, and also when a modeling agency chooses to represent you, that's their choice, but they are officially your employee. You give them commission for the work they procure for you. Not every agency wants models to feel empowered by that, power dynamic. But I think that, a gallery is the same thing. They work for me representing the work that I have, consigned with them. So I think in that sense, I don't want to, walk in with a huge ego, but I want somebody who's got some hustle. There are a lot of people who are just build it and they will come. We'll put some stuff on the wall. We'll see if anybody wants to buy it. No. I want somebody who is braver, bolder, bossier. I want somebody with chutzpah behind me so I can just focus on painting and they can go out and like beat on doors. That's what I'm giving you 20%, or in the case of paintings, 50%. That's what I'm giving you 50% for, is to be a hustler.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not sure there's a lot of galleries out there that hustle that hard. I think you're right. They hang your stuff and then they let, the artwork sell itself, which, that's great in its own way. But you need somebody out there saying, hey, have you seen, Gina's work? You're going to love it. It really fits in with your style. I have a list of people I can call, of clients and I can sell your stuff. And I'm not sure galleries today are doing that. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I'm, not a professional out there doing it either, but that's just my sense.
Yeah, I'd say it's some of each maybe. And if there are galleries out there that are doing that, call me. It's interesting for me. I've done a lot of these sort of museum fundraiser kind of group shows recently. And they're nice as far as building your CV and being part of a community and getting your work out there to like audiences you wouldn't otherwise reach. And their commission's usually pretty favorable, but nobody's selling for you, it sucks because you invest a lot to get out there and, to frame your work and ship your work, but like they're like volunteer docents and they're just like someone who does a transaction. They just like sit at a table. And if somebody really wants it, they like grab the ticket and bring it up to the table, but they're not salespeople, which is okay. Like, I don't know that we want salespeople working in our institutions, but I think that like being in the more commercial space, directly commercial space will be exciting for me. And having somebody who actually like really wants to, pound the pavement in order to earn their commission. Like that's the next step for me, is finding a dealer or, more in different cities or something that like really works hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you had a lot of like, let's say nonprofits approach you to get some of your work to sell for fundraising?
Yeah, there's kind of two like buckets, I guess, how that goes. A lot of these museum shows, like the artist does keep, some portion of the proceeds. And then there's the donation things as well. So every once in a while, I'll donate something. And that's kind of a sticky thing, because you don't want to donate something that's great, that you actually want to get paid for, but you also don't want to donate something that you don't like, and then people will see this bad work of yours. So it's kind of a line. You normally donate something that's not terrible, but is small and not super valuable. But yeah, I think it's hard. Artists get hit up for that kind of stuff all the time. And yeah, I don't know. I'm always happy that I'm able to support somebody's cause, and especially if it's a cause that I reach out to. Sometimes I donate my work, volunteer to donate my work or reach out in advance. And I think the Western world in general is really good about supporting people and causes, say like a Cowboy Crisis Fund or something like that. I've definitely thrown some work in there, partly because I know most cowboys don't have medical insurance if they get beat up in a equine airborne event. A lot of people in my family have been involved in things like that. So anytime I'm seeing a little like kind of grassroots fundraiser for that sort of thing, like, yeah, I'll throw a painting or a sketch or something in there and be like, hey, make whatever money you can to help this guy who's, in a body cast.
Right. Yeah. I feel like our listeners will know that I used to work at a nonprofit, and a lot of times a nonprofit think that you should just give us your stuff and then we sell it and we keep the proceeds for our fundraiser, whatever program we're doing. And I've really come, after talking to a number of artists, I've really come to really respect the idea that, they should get a cut, but they should, but the artist should get a cut as well, because, you're devaluing your gallery representation sometimes if you're not careful with that. So you don't want to do that. But at the same time, you guys are kicking butt and working hard, and it doesn't seem like maybe hard because you're painting, how hard is that? But it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of creativity and there's a lot involved. And man, I'm really an advocate for make sure you pay your artists that's donating work. They should get a cut for sure. So.
Yeah, well, and if you're going to give them a cut, you're more likely to get bigger, better value things that might actually bring more income to your organization net. Like I can give you an entire painting that maybe would go for $400. But if you want to get in on a painting that I'd charge $8,000 for, half of that's still pretty good for your organization. So I think that's something to consider, I guess. If you could get bigger, better work from artists if they're not going to lose everything.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So compare and contrast your experience as a model with what you do as an artist. And are there any other takeaways from your modeling experience that, we discussed a little bit the applicable things in the business realm of things, but is there anything else that you've taken away from that experience?
Oh, more than anything, being a model or an actor or anybody else who's involved in what I'd call a winner-take-all industry is that you have to get used to rejection, a lot of it. And you'll take it personally because it is personal, but it's not personal, but it feels personal, and so in a lot of the same ways, applying to an open show or a grant or something as an artist, you have to summarize yourself, you have to show them your portfolio. In some cases, you're somewhere in person once you've gotten into the show, but it's so tiring. And I think that you better just, brace yourself for honestly, at this point, years of struggle. And I've had some big successes, and I'm super grateful and excited that sometimes these things fell into place, maybe even before I was ready, or at a time when maybe I wasn't the best candidate and they were, looking for something different, somebody new, whatever. But I think more than anything, being a model is presenting your body of work, or in this case, your own body and your portfolio, to a group of people who don't know you at all and have some sort of objective you're not really sure what it is. It's kind of a private conversation. Hopefully it's a private conversation. If they're analyzing you while you're in the room, that really hurts. I don't speak a lot of Italian, but enough to know what's going on. But I think in the art world, you're going to get people who make snap judgments. That's their job. That's what it is. If you're a juror or you're a panelist or something, is they're just going to see a lot of options really quickly. And they're just going to, sometimes it's arbitrary. They don't even know what they like about it or what they don't like about it. Or maybe they're like, oh, we already let 2 figurative artists into this show, so we don't have room for any more. We don't know. They're arbitrary decisions. And the best thing you can do is to not let it get to you. But that's easier said than done. It gets to me some days.
So how do you handle it when you get criticism and maybe it's a bad day and you're not, you're not taking it as well? What do you do?
I literally go outside and scream off the balcony. I look like I don't have a lot of neighbors, but I will like scream, just like let out a scream. One day I'll recount my recent bad day. And it all kind of worked out. But I had, there was a whole period this spring, I guess, of applications to most of these big shows, the big jury kind of museum shows and other things. And I got 2 rejections in the same day from things that like one I actually thought was a really good chance that I would get into. The other one was kind of a long shot, but like back to back that morning too, we saw lots of great applications. The decision was so hard kind of emails. And I was like, okay, let out a scream, whatever, gonna go about my day. And I just couldn't shake it. And I was like, man, why am I letting this bother me so much? So I got in the car and I drove to the post office to pick up my mail. I was like, I just want to clear my head. I want to get out of here. I just want, like change the scenery. And I get to the mailbox and there's a paper rejection letter from another show. And I was like, anyway, that's a day in the life of an artist.
So scream therapy works for you?
I'd say it's the best one. Yeah. I've never really been into the scream space on TikTok. I believe it exists though, that like, if you just want to like have the scream therapy groups over there, or, maybe I'll become a TikTok influencer just by screaming, but
right.
Yeah.
Now is it an actual scream or is there like profanity involved?
It could be both. I guess it depends on you just got to go in the moment. You really can't script this stuff. It's all very, visceral. But yes, a big scream, some F words, whatever works for you. If you know the juror's name, if it's on the paper, you could use that too.
That's awesome. Alcohol ever involved or a hot beverage?
I get rejected mostly in the morning, but I won't say a beer doesn't set me back on the right path at noon.
There you go. That's funny. That's a great question, by the way.
And you still model. Is that correct? You're still a working model?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit over the years, partly because I don't live in a major city and partly because I'm old. Like the field of opportunities are different. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think back to kind of technology changing the way we interact. I think it's changed advertising and marketing so much in the past few years and probably will continue to change. So I think at this point in my career, I'm really going to be pursuing like different kinds of work, maybe brand partnerships, not like, here's my discount code to get some protein powder, because that's not me. But, I don't know if you guys saw Stetson did a collaboration with Thomas Blackshear and Logan Maxwell Hajej and a couple other artists maybe for their 100th anniversary of this Lon McGarvey painting, the horse drinking out of the hat. So they had some contemporary artists like do a new take on that. So I wasn't invited to that, but I see those kind of opportunities coming up and thinking like, yeah, that's something that actually kind of melds both worlds, so they do these really arty behind the scenes videos and, it's branded content, but it's good branded content. So I think for me, maybe that's probably more in my future, certain things that kind of take into consideration who I am. When you're a young model, you're meant to be a blank slate. Like they do not want personality. They don't require it, and they usually don't want you to. And as I got older and I changed my hair and I got wrinkles and I kind of became more of an individual, I'm getting some really specialized jobs, but I'm not getting all those every job ever. But I think the specialized jobs are more fun and they fit into my lifestyle a little bit better too. I live 2 hours from San Francisco now. I don't want to be running around to castings and things.
Right.
Yeah. Don't blame you. And I think, just like how people have this romantic idea, this glamorous idea of what it is to be an artist, same thing with a model, right? Like modeling is hard work and there's a lot expected from you, waking up at the crack of dawn and freezing your behind off, standing in a body of water or at the end of a dock or whatever it may be, that scenario, right? It's not always great.
No, it's a grind for sure. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the fashion industry is about 6 months ahead at any point. So you're shooting swim in December and you're shooting furs in July.
Yeah, it's kind of it's understandable how they operate, but at the same time, it's hard to like wrap your head around the fact that you're shooting a winter catalog in the heat of July, right?
Yeah, I did this like fur coat campaign, like the very first job I ever did in Italy, in Rome in like June, and just like fur coats, no AC. I mean, I am drenched. I am dying. Like so much so that these little bits of fur like sticking to my neck and I'm getting like rashy. It sounds like a first world problem, but it was a really long, grueling day.
The glamour of modeling, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Chinchilla sticks to your sweat.
That kind of like creeps me out a little bit.
You're telling me. Wait till it's stuck to your neck.
Right.
So you graduated from art school. Has it been a pretty easy going since you graduated and kind of made that jump, or has there been some bumps in the road? Obviously, you've had your modeling career, going at the same time, so you've had income, but how has that been?
Oh, there have been fits and starts for days, and I think most artists would attest to this. And if you didn't, like, good for you. I don't know, write me, tell me the formula. But you get a lot of opportunities that show up that are like really cool as far as the exposure or the peer group you're being invited into. And sometimes you can't afford to always be submitting to shows. For a while there, I was not submitting to open shows at all because they feel a little bit like a Ponzi scheme. If I could be honest with you, like there's tirade alert. They're so expensive to reject you. You have to pay them a fee to enter and then you still don't get in. Like it's a numbers game. You have to do a lot of them. But, some of these, I paid $125 for an open call recently that I didn't get in. And that was the day I screamed off the balcony. Because, usually it's like 30 or 40 bucks to submit, but some of them will do like per image. This one had a minimum of 5 images and it was 25 an image. And you're just like, oh man, this stings. Like it hurts that they're earning money off the artist through this. I understand why they have administrative fees so they can pay their juror and, they maintain their website and all these things, but some of them really sting. So when I was at my poorest, I wasn't even participating in these or like trying to, because it just seems stupid. And like, it's a vanity exercise. If you've got the disposable income, cost of doing business. But like if things are tight, and I've had highs and lows in my modeling career, I've had to get other jobs in between. And so, yeah, like just throwing money away in this like gambling machine. I'm from Nevada too. Like I'm actually a gambler in that, like, I think you have to have some delusional sense of self-confidence to be a model or to be an artist, to think that like, yeah, I am one in a million. Like, I'm going to get constantly humbled, but like you have to have some sort of crazy sense of like, yeah, I could do this in order to even like keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to kind of have to walk that fine line between being a narcissist and being humble, right?
Yeah, well, and honestly, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that you do need to love talking about yourself. Hi, thanks for having me on the show. Can I talk about myself for 2 hours? It's funny because I feel more prepared than a lot of other artists and a lot of what I consider the soft skills, and that this isn't hard for me. This doesn't scare me. Like this is fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy, like I've spoken on panels and, been on TV and some of these things, but like modeling prepared me for that for sure. Like I have fallen down on the runway before. Okay. Can you think of anything more embarrassing? So like stumbling over my words on an art podcast is not the scariest thing I have done.
Right.
Yeah, it's trial by fire, right? It's, another profession where you are in that kind of scenario is the comedy world, where you could just totally blow it. You could have a really bad night. Same thing. I mean, there's nothing more frightening than being in front of a bunch of people and flubbing it up somehow, right? But I agree with you in that I feel like you, as an artist, as a person, are much better prepared in a lot of ways than a lot of other people. And it's due to your unique experiences that you've had, your life experiences.
Yeah. And I think that's something I really want to continue putting into the work too, and I think Kind of to return to your earlier question, it's been honestly 10 years of kind of ebbs and flows. I've had some really big projects land. I did a piece for this local fundraiser in San Francisco that ended up being purchased by Alaska Airlines, and it's in the airport now. And so there was a big brouhaha around that, which was exciting.
What was the brouhaha around that?
So the fundraiser itself is called Hearts in SF. If you've ever been to San Francisco, you've probably seen these big fiberglass hearts around the city. But essentially, they commission a group of artists every year to paint these hearts. It's like if they send you a form to your studio. So I won the bid one year, and I did one, and then they go back and then they find sponsors to place them. So Alaska Airlines purchased mine, and they put it in San Francisco Airport, which was amazing, like far better than I had ever expected. But my artwork was kind of a cityscape with some clouds and a little bit of this thing. I hadn't thought of it before, but yeah, Alaska Airlines probably liked that it was something you might see from above, right? So they purchased this. We had this big press event. It was super fun and super amazing. It was like on Valentine's Day. So, media's all there. It's kind of a big to do. And yeah, I mean, it was almost embarrassing how much attention was paid to me in this moment, but it was fun. It was exciting, and you're like, wow, something's really happening here. Every once in a while you get these feelings of oh, there's a little bit of loft underneath my wings. Like the establishment knows I'm alive. They know I exist.
So talk about this piece that we're currently looking on our website. I don't know if you can see it, but can you talk about that and your concept behind it?
Yeah. So the concept behind it was to do the skyline of San Francisco, but not like the downtown skyline. I lived on the west side for a lot of years out by the beach. They call it the Sunset District, or Outer Lands was what they called it, back in the day before it had been developed. So Outer Lands is the title of this piece. But yeah, it's essentially the silhouette of all these buildings in my neighborhood. I'd ride the train downtown every day, and it was above ground through my neighborhood, and then it'd go in the tunnel. So through my neighborhood, I would literally be sitting there with a sketchbook, just drawing silhouettes, contour drawings of buildings I liked or trees I liked. And I just had this sketchbook full of little doodles of every shape I saw on my way to work every day. And that's kind of what became this skyline. And then there are succulents, because this was 2018 and they were ubiquitous at the time. But they were also ubiquitous in this neighborhood. So, literally every little hipster girl ever had a succulent garden that she'd robbed from her neighbor, so to speak.
It's a beautiful piece. I like it. Go ahead,
really
Tom.
is. And so this sits at San Francisco International Airport in Terminal 2. Is that correct?
Terminal 2. Yeah, that's the Alaska terminal. So it lives there. It's still there today, as far as I know. I get tagged every once in a while by people traveling and stuff. But yeah, we did this big press event in the airport proper. And then the fundraiser itself, which is part of SF General Hospital fundraiser, had a gala at Giant Stadium, which this is how you know what era I'm from. I call it AT&T Park. It's got a new name now. I think it's Oracle. But if you were really old, you would have called it Pac Bell. So you can tell what generation of San Franciscan people are by what they call the stadium. But it was AT&T Park at the time. So they had this big, luncheon thing out on the grass. My sister and I just went out there and aerated the field with our heels. I did something kind of dumb. I'm a little embarrassed to admit, but I picked up the phone in the bullpen and I just really wanted to, and it set off an alarm.
Really?
Yep. Anyway, so that face right there is me being oh crap, get out of here. Don't pick up the phone in the bullpen if you're ever invited to wander around the stadium.
Oh man, didn't know that. That's great. How big a piece is this?
It's probably 5 feet wide, 5 feet tall, 3 feet thick, or something like that. It's a sculptural form, and then you paint it. I also did gold leaf, and honestly, the gold leaf is not wearing well. Last time I saw it in the airport, maybe people are rubbing Buddha's belly to for good luck or something. The gold leaf is not looking as pretty as it used to. They may bring me in to repair it someday or something, or just throw it away. I don't know what happens.
Well, it'd be a shame if they just threw it away. So hopefully,
yeah, well, I doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah. Hopefully it gets acquired somewhere if it doesn't continue to live in the airport, or they offer it back to you, right?
Yeah, I don't know how that happens. I mean, it's there as long as it's there. So
was this your first piece of public art that you've done?
It's the first piece of public art that I was the lead artist on. So I was a studio assistant for another artist for a number of years. Hi, Stephanie Muffson, if you're out there. Love you. What a fun, magical time that was. But yeah, I literally had responded to a Craigslist ad for people with, like, they said tool dexterity and things. They weren't necessarily looking for artists. They were looking for more like tradey people who'd been, set deck on movies, or people who'd work in like, concert builds, grips, like rigging kind of people, like people with real solid skills. And I get there and it's out on a pier, kind of actually right next to where the new Warriors stadium is, actually predating the Warriors. I was working there as they're building the stadium. But it's out on a pier and it's this giant warehouse and it is just full of like ridiculous stuff, like, 12-foot styrofoam jaguar head and like sparkly, bonsai trees and just like the craziest stuff. So here I am, like kind of to interview, but it's also just like a trial day. And she just like throws me in the mix. And it was amazing. It was really one of those times where I was like, wow, this is like the island of lost toys. Like the biggest peer group of just like people trying to make a living as artists and like doing crazy random odd jobs. Like this place during a big event, if we were really crewed up, we could have 40 or 50 people. During the slow season, maybe 5. But like crazy stuff. We did all the parades for San Francisco, but we also did a lot of corporate events. So, we made like decorations for George Lucas's birthday party, and we did the Google Halloween party. And I mean, just like, you've got some weird whimsical kind of concept, like this is the lady you hire. And she's got a whole workshop full of elves, like putting glitter and fiberglass and, whatever on things. So that was cool for me to like learn a bunch of different materials as well. So just kind of every day's a different day. You get to work and they're like, okay, you're going to make a 12-foot lollipop. Get to it.
So this entire time, since you've left art school, you've had your hand in art in some way, shape, or form, even if you weren't like full on working on your own stuff. Is that correct?
I've tried, for the most part. There definitely have been some times where I had to take like real jobs with health insurance and things that aren't that glamorous. But yeah, I would say for maybe like 80% of the time, at least, I've had some sort of vocation that's connected to the art world. I worked at SF MoMA for 3 years in the education department, working with kids, taking them on field trips and doing like art activities and things, and also doing some in-school programming back at their schools all around the Bay Area. So that was cool as well. But yeah, I've tried to keep my foot in the art world, but easier said than done, because everybody wants an art world job and the pay usually isn't that good and the benefits aren't usually that good.
So how did you pick your medium that you were going to base your career on? Was that something that you thought about, or is it just naturally you're a painter?
I think painting in general is just like, it's the thing of the masters, I guess I could sculpt in marble or something, but that's even harder and more cost prohibitive. Oil painting has been around for so long because it works, it's durable, it's relatively affordable. I'm not going to say that like painting is cheap to do, but versus, having some sort of big practice where you have to get things fabricated at a foundry or, it's a pretty DIY kind of thing. There are fewer barriers to entry. Easel painting is like, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to go to work and I'm going to make a thing. So maybe I'm kind of a cowboy in that I like being a little independent and rogue. But also oil painting is really forgiving. Like I respect the hell out of like watercolor artists. You guys, I don't know. Oil painting is much more forgiving. You can make a lot of mistakes and like patch over them. So I appreciate that. As I said, sometimes I'm designing on the canvas or changing my mind midway. So having that, opacity is really cool.
You paint every day?
Right now, yeah. I haven't always, but I would say for maybe the past year and a half, 2 years, it's been my number one job. I do a little bit of freelance writing in the arts sector as well, but that doesn't take up a ton of my time. I'm saying I probably paint 6 hours a day right now.
I noticed on one of your Instagram, you were painting 2 paintings at the same time, and the color palettes were pretty much identical. So it allows you to do that. And I thought that was kind of ingenious. Is that something you normally do, or was that an exception?
It depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. But yeah, if I'm trying to make a set, I guess, especially if they're smaller and you can kind of like do a little here, do a little there without like running into problems with dry time or that sort of thing. I do like doing a diptych together, essentially. So if I'm meaning for them to be like the same work of art or, things that I hope to sell together, using exactly the same paint really helps them look unified.
Tenant wants to acknowledge our media sponsor, New Magazine. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. And I want to share with you something very exciting. Check out the newly launched New Denver Gallery Guide. Look for the signage that says New Denver Gallery Guide that has a QR code. Scan it with your phone, and you have instant access to a comprehensive digital guide to Denver's finest galleries and exhibitions. Find this QR code in your favorite gallery, hotel, or coffee shop as you visit and explore Denver. Thanks for listening.
I'm Gina Teichert, and you're listening to the Tenant Podcast.
So what's your regular routine? You say you paint 6 hours a day. What does your day look like typically?
My husband's in construction, so he gets up at like 6 probably, and I lay around and doom scroll for about 2 hours. And then I make myself some coffee and go outside with the dogs and play with the horses. And if I have a writing job, maybe I'll have an interview or something that I need to do with someone I'm, writing about. I'd say I'm probably in the studio, actually suited up and ready to paint by noon, which isn't exactly an alpine start. But I think that morning ritual is actually pretty important for me in that, I spend a little time online, either reaching out to press, trying to get a little bump for a show that's coming, or, looking for new opportunities. Once again, that kind of open call thing, you got to actually vet the open calls and see if they're even worth giving them your $30 for. So there's a lot of admin work, update your website or do something on social media. So I would say the morning kind of, 8 to noon or something, I'll probably screw around, honestly, not always be the best with my time as far as actually accomplishing anything. Right now, I'm trying to send at least 3 awkward emails a day. So I'll report back on how this practice is going. But I think a lot of people are shy or modest or don't want to be a bother or whatever. So I'm trying to send at least 3 emails about something that makes me nervous every single day, whether that's pitching an editor. Hey, I got a show in LA coming up. Do you want to come see it? Or, pitching some podcast guys hey, I loved your show. A friend of mine was a guest on your show. I'd love to be part of your conversation. Or, I don't know, reaching out to a dealer, whatever it is. 3 awkward emails a day right now. So that morning time is useful, even if it's not actively painting.
I think that's a great idea. What a great tip.
Yeah. It's all fuel for the fire, right?
I'll let you know how it goes.
Well, I think it's going to be great. I mean, then it's a numbers game. A lot of times, it's like sales. It's cold calls it's a number game. You get 1 yes out of 15 no's. It's still, whatever. So 3, even if they're awkward emails, I think that's a great way to start.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll report back and see how it goes. But
we'll wait. I love to hear how it works.
I'll send you my stats.
There you go.
Are you typically a goal setter?
Goals are funny. I think that they're really useful, and they can also make you feel like shit. So I think being strategic in goal setting is important. I think everybody probably has some broader, big picture kind of goals. I want to make a living as an artist. Let's just put that out there. If I just hold a candle for that goal without anything tangible that helps me get there, I think I'm just setting myself up for disappointment. So sure, that's my big hope out there. Make a living as an artist. That's over there. But I think that the real kind of nuts and bolts goals, I'm going to, complete 1 painting a week, or I'm going to, get into 1 show every quarter, or I'm going to send 3 awkward emails every morning, or, having little bite-sized things that you can break down is useful in not setting yourself up for just this feeling of not having any traction at all. I think, and it ebbs and flows for everybody. I mean, I had some big setbacks. I mean, I literally got locked out from this big show kind of series of this fall into early next year. I just got shut down. Oh my gosh, and I did scream off the balcony. But what that did do is it freed me up to work on some projects that I wouldn't have done otherwise, that wouldn't have been a perfect fit for those shows, that I've kind of had on the back burner, that, you know, I have sketchbooks full of ideas and I'm like, when's the right time to really like dive into this concept? So what it did is it really like freed me up to work on something that I have more, I don't know, I guess like personal attachment to. And that's the work that I've been getting really good feedback about. So it was like, wow, maybe the tail's not wagging the dog for the next 6 months. Cause I would have made work for those markets had I been invited to those shows. And I don't want to say that that's bad or disingenuous. It's just, that's the fact, you know, like you're going to have to consider the audience, consider the location, consider the taste of the jurors and the people who support those museums. And I don't have to consider shit now. I mean, literally, I am considering me. And this work that I'm sending to LA is like at an artist run space. I had a meeting with these gals and they're like, I don't know, here's how much wall we have. Put whatever you want on it. And I was like, whatever I want.
That's what you want to hear right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're feeding your own soul when you're painting what you want to paint. That's awesome.
Yes.
You talk about, you know, like one of the goals, and I know it's probably just a loosely based goal, but painting a painting a week. Are you a fast painter, or does it take time for you to paint your pieces? Obviously, size probably dictates, but would you consider yourself a fast painter?
Depends on if the magic is in my fingertips that day. You know, there are days when like it just comes together, and you're like, yes, I'm golden God. Like, this is amazing. I am like, everything is going right. And sometimes, and it doesn't always have to do with size or concept or whatever. Some days it's just a slog. And I think it's that way with anybody, any job, anything. Like some days you're just like on. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I have to complete something once a week, but like, I really want to put that like those real hours of practice in. I think for me, that's the discipline part. You know, I was talking to an art dealer a while ago. He said he was lecturing somewhere, you know, and he was lecturing a group of artists about how to get representation or something. And he said at the very beginning, he went up and he said, how many of you guys paint 4 hours a day? Raise your hand. Everybody else get out. So from the very beginning, you know, am I actually practicing as an artist? So, you know, some days better than others. Some days I spend a lot of time, you know, drawing or like working on my photo references and figuring out what the next painting is going to be. I would say that kind of pre-work, I'm trying to dedicate more time to it than I used to, just because you get into trouble. Sometimes you have a conceptual thing or a compositional thing and you're like, I should have done a little more work. But some days you're just super excited to paint. You're like, I just want to paint something. So, you know, you gotta kind of play to both sides of your personality like that. But I would say when I'm starting a painting, I'm pretty like rock and roll. You know, I mean, even my soundtracks are different. Like I will listen to some like Black Sabbath or something. I'm like, whoa, yeah. Like starting a painting is really fun and physical and visceral, especially big paintings. And then as I get down to the detailed stuff, I'm putting on like really intellectual little podcasts and doing detail work.
That's interesting. I would have never picked you as a Black Sabbath girl, but you know, whatever it takes, right?
That's that darkness that kind of infiltrates, right? That
Yeah.
noir, right?
Exactly.
Sabbath will bring that to the forefront real quick.
It will, you know, or I really like some of this sort of, I don't know, almost soundtracky, like movie soundtrack kind of stuff. Calexico, if I'm doing some sort of moody sort of Southwest, you know, bad bitch on a revenge path kind of stuff.
Do you have a whole backstory for your pieces? Like some of your women figures, you talked about being a bad bitch. So do you have a narrative for some of your subjects?
Some of them I do. I think they're not really, they're not an official narrative, but I think especially when I'm preparing the model, I'll usually send them an inspiration deck with some kind of background on who this character is they're going to play. And once again, the music, if I put a certain kind of music on set when I'm shooting them, like Calexico, for example, I have this series called The Ballad of Boot Hill, and it's kind of a gal who's a little, I don't know, a little forlorn. You're not really sure what's going on with her. Like she might be sad. She might be pissed. She might be on the revenge path. I don't know. So I kind of gave them model a little bit of guidance around that. And we totally did play Calexico during the shoot, but I thought like, well, maybe she's like the gunslinger's widow or daughter, who knows what it is, but there's this woman who's like, seems like maybe she's a victim, but like, not sure for how long she's going to play that victim card, so that's one of the things I really like about that spaghetti western kind of era of movies as well. Those women, they didn't stay victims for very long, and they were usually looked pretty good while they were getting their revenge.
Well, they definitely have a narrative feel to them, and that's part of the reason why I asked the question. But the one we're looking at is called, what's this one called, Todd?
Ballad of Boot Hill.
Oh, okay. Definitely, you feel a narrative there. I love that. I love the religious symbolisms in the back. I love the fact that she's smoking a cigarette and her lip is kind of snarled. Yeah, she looks like a badass. That's for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this model really accomplished the goal too. I gave her this character and she really went for it. So that was fun.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece.
Thank you.
So what was the impetus of this piece? Where did it kind of come from?
I had a bunch of sketchbooks for a long time with these kind of, sultry women with a little bit of a gothic feel, or, I've had like a thing with old graveyards too. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but like I do a lot of traveling around the West. Most of the places between like where my family lives and where I'm going, like I'll just pop a squat and go camp somewhere on the way. I went to Utah earlier this spring to see my sister, but like between California and Utah, there's a whole lot of nothing. So I just pulled over for a few days and camped out in the desert, came upon some old, like literally there's not even a sign of a town. The only thing left is a cemetery, so I don't know, for some reason, I always kind of suss out these old cemeteries. I got a flat tire on that road though. So the ghosts were like, I don't know, get out of here.
Yeah, you're a girl after my heart. I love cemeteries. I love old ones, especially if they have some, like a really feel to them. The flat headstone stuff, I don't care about that anymore. I want to see something that has like some like really guttural feel to it, and I love that idea.
Yeah, this cemetery in particular that I went to in April, there were some ghosts out there for sure. It was right at the site where the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. So Golden Spike area north of the Great Salt Lake. But I think there's some ghosts out there. I think some human blood was shed in order to complete that project. And I don't know, it was kind of funky out there.
I bet.
I love kind of the symbolism that's going on in this particular piece. You have some grave markers over her left shoulder, but then you have this upside down cross by her right shoulder there, and the contrast of kind of good and evil, I guess, in some ways. And she's very sexy, and I don't care what anybody says, smoking to me is still a sexy thing, even though it's absolutely horrible for you. Somebody smoking a cigarette, that can be really cool, whether it's a photograph, whether it's a painting or a scene in a movie, right? Like there's something sexy about smoking.
It's totally true. And I quit smoking years ago, but I still think like, like as a visual signifier of like a good girl gone bad. Like what else is there? You look at like Grease. What's she coming out smoking, wearing leather and stuff, like it is such a trope, but it's like, it's one I like, it's such it's ingrained in our society in a way that we can't extract it.
Yeah.
This piece is actually going to be on display soon. Talk about that particular exhibition that you're a part of.
Yeah, so this is a new gallery in San Francisco, which I've never actually been to. So I'm going to go drop off the piece next week and I can report back. But it's in the Union Square area of San Francisco, which is kind of like the downtown shopping district. And it's called Blue Stream Gallery. So I think they opened in April maybe, but this is their first like inaugural kind of group show where it's really like a survey of what's going on in the Bay Area. So it's called New History. And the opening is September 2nd. So that's Labor Day weekend. The show itself will be on from August 31st to September 13th, but the reception will be September 2nd. So I'll be down in the city for that. And, I don't know, kind of getting to know some of my contemporaries again, because honestly, I haven't been in a show in San Francisco proper like since before the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see what the scene's like, what other people are doing, also kind of the taste of this gallery. Anytime you get involved in a group show, like it can be a total grab bag, or it can be like a really thoughtful sort of selection of things that all are in dialogue with one another. I have no idea what's going to be there. So it'll be kind of fun to see how that goes.
And do you have more than just this one piece, Ballad of Boot Hill, or is this the only piece that's in that particular exhibition?
Just the one in the show. So it truly is a survey. I think everybody just has one piece in the show. So there'll be a lot of artists. That's the other thing that's fun about group shows. While it can be kind of a crapshoot, tons of people show up because you have so many artists and their friends and family are there. So it's a great opportunity to meet people and like be part of the community in like more of a meaningful way.
What was the catalyst for you to really kind of jump back in with both feet and really like start hitting it hard with your art career?
Well, it's funny. First of all, I got to say thank you to my husband for like keeping his real job and having one. And I think there should be way more transparency in the art world of like what it actually costs to get off the ground. Because I think it's disheartening for somebody when you're really a weekend warrior or whatever, and you can't afford to go to these shows or frame your stuff or ship your stuff. So I think some of it was just having a like stability. So thank you to my husband for having a real job that made me able to do this in a more meaningful way with more, more time invested in it, being able to, have the capital to do what it takes to do it. There were a lot of times when I lived in San Francisco, I was very poor, and San Francisco is an extremely expensive city, but it is kind of a dignified place to be poor because so many of your contemporaries are too. So they'll just like, let's get a bottle of the wine and go to the park, or something like you could be pretty like social and still not have to spend money or not a lot of money. So I think that was nice to, kind of bound by mutual suffering. Many of my friends were in poverty.
It's really getting a bad rap lately in the news with the homeless population and that's everywhere. Denver, homeless populations in Rapid Cities even increased. Do you think it's a fair rap, or do you think the city has a handle on it, or what's your opinion?
Oh, well, they use this term doom loop, which the San Francisco Chronicle is using a lot. So I'm like, that's a self-fulfilling sort of a thing to call it a doom loop and keep bringing it up. Maybe you're creating more of a doom loop. I love San Francisco. It's home to me. I was there for 13 years. It's still, my nearest major city. But if I want to go to a show or a nice dinner or something, that's where I go. But even, when I first moved there in 2008, there was a shockingly high disparity of wealth, and there still is. Maybe it's more so, but like as a young girl, I don't know, wearing a short skirt walking down the street to a nightclub or something, it's never been safe for me. And I love San Francisco and I think it's a cool place, but it has got some, how do you say it, political problems around homelessness and drug abuse and kind of the tolerant culture around that. I'm not saying that a crackdown in any kind of legal sense would even fix it. I think it's really challenged. And I don't know what the solution is. I hope they can find one. I love the place. I want it to feel safe to walk around. And, I went out to a couple openings about 2 weeks ago, and it really felt like it was coming back, since the pandemic. More energy on the streets, lots of people at these shows. Like, it felt a little bit more like old times. But as far as the encampments and the drug use and the car break-ins, that stuff's all still there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not new, it's been going on forever, but it just seems lately I've been, San Francisco and Portland and Seattle and even Denver's just been getting hammered with that kind of stuff. And, once again, if all you're reading is negative stuff, that's how your view is going to be. So it's, so you got to, like you said, kind of take it, parse it for what it is. And I'm sure San Francisco is an absolutely gorgeous place to be, or it wouldn't be quite the successful, city that it is. So.
Yeah. One thing I've always appreciated is San Francisco is kind of a live and let live city. And maybe that's part of what's, fostered some of these, other things happening there. But for me, I don't know, no matter who you were, where you were from, most of my friends were like refugees from somewhere else who were like the one weirdo in their small town or something. Like whatever flag you're flying, San Francisco like welcomes you. And I think that that's always been really cool. You know, I don't know, you know, that joke, like there's a fetish for that. Like if you're into crocheting or whatever, you're probably going to find a crew. Like people crochet like koozies around trees and stuff, you know. I don't know, like who knew there was gorilla crocheters? Like
that's awesome. I love that. But you're right, you're absolutely right. There's a crew for everybody, right?
I want to pull up another piece I want to talk about. It was part of actually I think it may, no, it's past, but I want you to talk about the piece and the exhibition that it was part of. This particular piece, Atomic Madonna. Can everybody see that on my screen?
Yeah, I love that piece. I love that.
I'm with Wes. Beautiful piece. Talk about what's going on here and the show that it was part of.
Yeah, so this one I would say is probably more personal than some of the other work that I've done that kind of has on the surface a pretty traditional paint application, composition. The subject matter seems pretty traditional. It's a riff off the classical, like Madonna and Child, you know, the mother and child, all the way back to the Renaissance, people are doing this mother and child. It's also a little tiny bit of a hat tip to my great grandmother. She was also one who did a lot of these Madonna and Child ones. And she always did really like strong women, like muscular women, partly because probably all her models were like farm girls. So this for me was an opportunity to kind of try something a little bit more conceptual within the lens of traditional painting. So the Springville Museum, which is in central Utah, like a little bit down from Provo, has an annual survey of Utah artists. And it's been 99 years they've done it so far. So it's the oldest museum in Utah, and it's really been kind of a career maker, or like, you know, for a lot of young artists, like high school kids have gotten in, and people who have like really great careers, you know. Greg Newbold was in it this year, who I've always looked up to. Like he's a really great artist. Very successful commercially. So anyway, it's once again, these big shows are kind of a grab bag. But I had done this piece specifically for this audience because I thought they'd get what I was doing, but also some of their parents and grandparents could have been impacted by this. So it's not just a mother and child. For those of you who are listening in and can't see it, pretty classic, like Great Basin landscape, sagebrush, buttes, you know, out to the alkali flat. But there happens to be an atomic detonation in the middle. And I will say thank you, Oppenheimer, for making this subject matter a little bit more on the forefront now, because this was earlier this spring before the movie had come out. But I think a lot more people are aware of like the impacts of atomic testing in the West. But yeah, the area that I grew up, and literally like between where I was born and where I spent most of my life, is all in the fallout zone. Like literally everything out there. You know, somebody from the Department of Defense once said it was a good place to drop used razor blades. Jerks. You know, not everybody likes the desert, but this specific part of the desert is home to me. So I'm a little defensive, you know, like I can pick up my little brother, but you can't. But yeah, so the atomic testing era in the US, specifically from the Nevada test site and Degway Proving Ground, had a lot of really bad effects on the like surrounding communities. There were huge cases of leukemia in kids, amazing like livestock die-offs, just like sheep with their faces falling off and stuff, you know. And the biggest thing there for me was that the government was really this was in the McCarthy era, and they were kind of saying, you know, moms would get together and be like, hey, all our kids are sick. This is weird. They'd be like, yeah, you're a communist. Don't ask questions, you know? So it was like, it was really, the way it was handled really bothers me and continues to bother me. If anybody has any interest in this subject matter, there's a great book out there called Downwind, like the tale of the atomic West that I had read. But it follows a lot of these cases. But also, I don't know, to me, it's not just a literal thing. It's maybe an allegorical thing too. Like if the government was capable of this in our kind of recent history, like what are they capable of now? Like what kind of technological advances have we made? And, you know, there's a lot of saber rattling going on abroad. Like, I don't know, I just wanted to make a little bit of a point about like, maybe we should kind of keep our eyes open and, stay aware of something that could be, parallel to this, but maybe take a different form.
Right. Yeah. Well, they've talked about Russia dropping, nukes onto the Ukraine. So and any kind of threat, that's definitely a possibility. So yeah, it's in present day thinking, isn't it? So in fact, they're, and around South Dakota, they're talking about, they're always trying to pass uranium mining again. And, and there's a large population that's opposed to it. And I would probably be part of that. So, but yeah, this is a beautiful piece and really makes you think. I love the sheep too. The sheep off to the right on the second the right hand side diptych. Do they represent anything in particular other than the story you told about their faces falling off?
Yes. So it's got a little bit of an allegory as well. Of course, actual sheep were harmed in the testing of nuclear weapons, but also sheep throughout art history and, the Bible and other things have represented a couple different things. One of which is like a loyal follower that doesn't ask questions, that, has a contrite spirit and all these kind of things. But also sheep can represent somebody who's blind to realities and vulnerable and can be eaten by wolves and things. So yeah, there's definitely an allegorical purpose for them being there beyond the fact that sheep themselves were impacted by these tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
One of the things I really find interesting about your work is that it has a very modern feel to it, but at the same time, it has this very kind of older feel as well. I mean, there's this like fine balance that you've struck, which I really appreciate. But some of the stuff reminds me of paintings from the WPA era, the early 20th century paintings that you see from like 20s, 30s, that sort of thing. But you have this very modern twist on it. Are you inspired by that era of artwork?
Yeah, I would say, especially with regards to WPA, that sort of social realism thing does come up in some works, like the one we just looked at, for example, in that like they were deliberately narrative. And some of the other work that I do is maybe a little bit more open to interpretation. I still want there to be narrative potential, but maybe it's a little bit more up to the viewer as to what that means. But even a little earlier than that, I'm quite interested in Art Nouveau, partly because all the little kind of wafy fairy chicks, a lot of them look like me. I have very long hair and kind of that body style. So I'm interested in kind of bringing back, I mean, it's almost 100 years ago. It's like exactly 100 years ago, Art Nouveau into Art Deco. So some of those illustration styles are really great. If you look at the old like cigarette ads from France and things, the way they use kind of decorative elements and negative shape and things, I really like that as far as just technical design references. But yeah, I'd say I'm kind of pulling stuff from all over the place. I'm pulling things from like 90s fashion photography, I mean, like Richard Avedon is amazing to me. I have that in the American West book, and every time I look at it, I'm like, wow, he has really just like captured people's beings. Like, how did he do that? And you see the behind the scenes and he's got a seamless on the side of his pickup truck in a parking lot in Topeka. And you're just like, dude.
That is an amazing series. And I appreciate that you appreciate Richard Avedon and that whole series that he did, because it's one of the things that definitely has stuck with me, and that I continually pick that book up, a handful of times every year and look through it, and I'm just in awe of what he did and what he captured.
Yeah. And then doing that after a huge successful, fashion art career, and then he goes off west and does, and like you said, he's got a white screen that he tapes to a building and shoots the B-Man, and just amazing work. Yeah, I love his work.
Do you watch a lot of movies, Gina? Are you a big movie buff?
Yeah. And I think now that we have long form like television shows at our disposal too, I do a lot of that. I'd say some of the ones that have really hit me recently, or over the past decade or so, Westworld, I've never felt like more seen by a character than Dolores. Oh my gosh, Westworld just like hit me in so many ways. And I would get up on the couch and like cheer and like, but also I love sci-fi and I love Western culture. So the fact that those got all melded together in a really intelligent and kind of dark conspiratorial sort of a, like a thriller almost, like that was fun.
And you do a little bit of everything when we're talking the Western genre. It's not typically in the traditional vein, which is something that you're kind of pushing back against. But I want you to talk about that, but I also wanted you to talk about the fact that you definitely, it's not just all figurative work. You do some other types of work as well. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, kind of back to our earlier conversation of wanting to have that visual signature, whether that's my paint application or compositional elements, graphic elements that are within it, whether it's a skull or a landscape or a sexy lady about to go like get revenge on somebody who did her wrong or, whatever it is, I want it to still feel like it's made by me. So I think that's something that I'm still kind of developing, I guess. I'm playing a lot with what I consider like a really rendered form. So oftentimes the figure in the foreground, and then things that are almost an illustration. So like line work, you'll see in some of these, there's almost just like a cartoon in the background. So for me, kind of deciding when to push and pull within those planes is something I'm getting better at, but I'm still every once in a while, like I said, I design on the fly. Every once in a while, I'll paint something back flatter because I'm like, oh, that was actually too much detail and it's pulling focus from the face. So I'm kind of playing with that. But for me, it's funny. I think people learn questions to ask artists when you're at a cocktail party or something like, oh, what do you paint? Do you do figures or do you landscapes? Or like still life? And that's like their question. And no shade to them. Like that's kind of a good place to start for most artists. But to me, it's not really about the object. I don't consider myself a still life painter, but I paint objects. I don't really consider myself a figurative painter, but I paint figures. So I think that's something I'm still kind of playing with as far as like the execution is the point of it more so than like what the actual object is. And those objects can have some narrative purpose or some allegorical purpose or purely decorative purpose. I mean, I love skulls. I just think they're cool. But if you really wanted to get deep, I could say it's a memento mori, and they're like, we're all mortal and you must die. But as far as the Western genre, I think I have a lot of, I don't know. I have a lot of different perspectives because I've been in that really staunch Western world, and I'm careful not to fall into the authenticity trap, or at least I try not to, because that's, oh man, you can really go down that. Like I know artists who've gotten like made fun of for putting the rope on the wrong side of the saddle, or something's wrong with the tack, or like that guy's hat shape doesn't match the region he's in, or, like there's so much stuff in there. And it's interesting, there's a lot of gatekeeping in the Western culture. And that I think that it's better to let more people in. So creating those sort of paintings or experiences where people who don't have a Western background can come in and appreciate them has been really moving for me and really important. So, I've shown in the very, very Western shows, but I'm actually having more fun taking Western subject matter into contemporary spaces and engaging with people who didn't grow up the way I grew up because they find it more interesting. Like, I don't want to sell cowboys stuff to cowboys. They've already got cowboy stuff in their life, taking cowboy stuff to a contemporary market and like engaging with that audience has been really fun. And they ask great questions and they're earnestly trying to like understand what it was like to grow up the way I grew up. And I was like, oh, you like this? Do you think this is interesting?
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. I love the fact that you're taking the Western style and bringing it to a contemporary market because I think a lot of people that paint Western stuff, they're really focusing on the Western market and that's all they care about. But you're wanting to broaden the whole audience of Western art in more of a contemporary way. And I love that. I think that's why I kind of really gravitate to your style of work than the traditional, cowboy Western painters. And there's some amazing stuff, but I kind of like stuff that's a little bit more contemporary now than I used to.
Well, thank you. And it's funny, this show that I'm doing in San Francisco at Blue Stream is a Korean-owned gallery. So I'm, first of all, excited that a Korean audience will get to see my work, or, we might be able to create some connections through social media and things. Like the last show they just closed was like a K-pop influenced show. So for me to be taking cowboy stuff into a gallery that also shows K-pop stuff, which Americans are nuts about, right? Like, I think it's good for the world, first of all, to like show each other new perspectives. Like, that's fun for me. I love K-pop. I think it's super fun and like, sugary, and like, it's a little bit of like a guilty pleasure to listen to. It's not always Black Sabbath, but that's what I'm saying on the podcast. It's Black Sabbath. But for the fact that I'm able to show my work to a completely different audience that has never been to, most of the American West, like, that's super cool. I'd love to take this show on the road someday and, show in Seoul or Tokyo or somewhere.
And the Far East, at least when I was in Japan, they love American culture. They really embrace it. And then they do their thing to it. And it's amazing. So
I love that mindset where you're taking what you do, what resonates with you, being true to yourself as an artist, and the things that, that you grew up with that resonate, and taking it into a space where you don't imagine seeing that type of work. I think that's so smart, where most people are trying to like put themselves in this particular box that fulfills, this particular audience or this particular, what people would imagine they would see in that particular space. You're like going the opposite direction.
Yeah, maybe I'm a salmon. Maybe I created some sort of current I got to swim against because I like the friction or something. But I've done this my whole life. I've kind of toggled between really wanting to fit in desperately and then realizing that wasn't what I actually wanted. The grass is always greener sort of a thing. In the fashion industry, for example. I mean, growing up, all I wanted to do was live in the suburbs and like go to the mall every afternoon, like my cool cousins or whatever, but I didn't have that kind of opportunity. I didn't live near a mall. I lived like 400 miles from a mall. But also I wouldn't have had the disposable income to go do that anyway. But here I am, I'm like 20, 22 probably. And I'm in Italy. I'm living in Italy at the time, working in fashion. I'm there for like season. And I'm on this shoot with like a really well-known photographer who's this older Italian guy who's just like obsessed with the American West. And I had done so much erasure at this time. I didn't even want anybody to know like who I was or where I was from or anything. I was just trying to like blank slate as best as I could. And here I'm meeting this really successful photographer who's like, oh my gosh, you're a cowboy? Like, I want to come to the ranch and do a big shoot. And, we could get a Ralph Lauren campaign or, like whatever. He's just so stoked about cowboy shit. And I'm sitting here, like, I went to great lengths to erase cowboy shit from my self. And now here's somebody who's in charge of, like who could make or break somebody's career, really like excited about that. And I'm like, interesting.
Yeah, that had to be an interesting epiphany, right? To like go, wow, there's people from other parts of the world that are really interested from the environment, about the lifestyle that I grew up with in,
Yeah, totally.
I want to talk about another piece that's going to be shown soon. I love this piece. This is actually a self-portrait.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about this piece and how it came about and where people can view it in the near future.
Yeah, I call this one Equilibrium. And this is the first like proper self-portrait I've done in probably 10 years. So anybody who's ever done a self-portrait or has even tried to take a selfie or heard their own voice, being recorded and played back to them knows that it's a great opportunity for self-doubt. But the amazing part of this painting is like I said, sometimes they really just come together and you got like lightning in your fingers. I never backed up on this. I never had a moment where I was like, nope, not what I want to do, recalibrate, whatever. Like this was forward only. It was great. No backspace on this one. And I think that in a lot of ways, that's kind of where the title came from, that maybe at this point in my life, like I've found a little balance and, I'm more equipped to navigate, not only career things and personal life things, relationships, but also a lot around like identity and perception of self, working in fashion and honestly just being a woman in the world and probably men too. I don't know if you guys are paying to watch workout videos, you're looking at someone else's body every day. So there's always opportunity for self-criticism and doubt and judgment and all of these things. And I think this represents a time in my life where I'm actually like really good. Like I'm just good.
Comfortable in your own skin in a sense.
Yeah.
So here's the thing I love about this, and it's always something weird that I love because I would have never thought of it. The hat levitating above your head that's what does it for me in this piece. Is like I look at it and it's really, really interesting what you have going on here. And talk about that, and like, because I wouldn't have done that. The hat would have been on the head and we'd have been fine, right? But you levitated it above the head in a very specific way. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that kind of came about by accident almost. I shoot my own reference generally, even with my own body. So here I have the camera on the tripod and I'm playing around with this hat. I'm kind of flipping it and doing things. And I just hold it up once and I'm like, ooh, that looks really cool up there. Maybe I should hold my hat. And I was like, I don't want to paint my armpits. That's weird. Maybe the hat is floating on its own. Maybe it's like, magnets, like some polarity or something, or I don't know exactly what it was, but I got into this idea that I liked the hat floating. And it kind of happened retroactively, but I've been looking at Magritte recently, and I'd already had this hat like in place floating. And I started looking at Magritte, and I was like, oh, maybe Magritte got into my brain somewhere back there in the art history land. I worked at SF MoMA when a big Magritte show came through, so I can't ever say I never saw Magritte. I saw everything Magritte did, but I really like what he does in that it's not super weird. I think that it's got a little bit of eeriness or magical qualities to it, but like he's a good painter. He's painting pretty straight, like things aren't grisly or he's not, it's not unnerving, but everything's just got a tiny little bit of a wink to it. So I think maybe there is a hat to Magritte in there, but also I just compositionally I liked that. I thought it was fun to kind of bring it back to that illustration kind of style as well. Some parts of it are pretty well rendered and some parts of it kind of break back down into a line drawing.
Yeah, I love it. And, knowing a little bit about your story, I could even envision that it's a separation of your past to who you are today, and read into that whole kind of, metaphor. But I was struck by that, and the solid block and how, that's a little modernist kind of ploy along with this figurative. It's magnificent.
Well, thank you very much. And yeah, this is part of that show that I was talking about in Los Angeles. It's at a space called Dorado 806, which is in Santa Monica. And literally, it's an artist-run gallery. So there are no teachers. I can bring whatever the hell I want. So that was really freeing for me. And I'd say some of this work that I've created for that show is my favorite work so far, in years for sure. Because literally, I can make whatever the hell I want. And that's been really freeing and fun.
It's a fantastic self-portrait. I would second what Wes just mentioned and talked about, but also I love this garment that you're wearing. Is there a name for that particular garment?
The actual one that I used in the photo reference was fringe. I'd say you could probably call it a loincloth or something.
Loincloth.
But yeah, I got it from a showgirl store in Las Vegas, like a vintage, showgirl stuff. I have a lot of vintage clothing that I use for models and other things, and sometimes just wear out to parties. Don't know that I would wear this one out to a party per se. But yeah, I have a lot of really interesting kind of costume wear.
Yeah. So this loincloth, I mean, not only does this feel like, you feel rooted and grounded in who you are and as a person, but I love that the flow of it is like the waterfall, right? This loincloth, and it's actually falling out of the square, almost like it's off the canvas. It's such a beautiful piece. Immediately when I went back to revisit some of your work, because like I said, we've been following you for a while, I was totally drawn to this piece. And then as I sat there, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize it was a self-portrait at first. I just thought it was a very interesting painting. And then I was like, oh, this is Gina,
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk about some of the other successes that you had in the last couple of years and some of those shows that have been important to you and your journey as an artist.
Yeah, I would say kind of straight out of the gate after the pandemic, I really started trying to show again. Partly, as I mentioned, I'd moved up here. I had a little more space to paint, actually. I had a little more time also because, like, there's nothing else to do. You know, I have no social commitments at all. I guess I'll paint. But the first show I did actually was a virtual show during the pandemic. Some of my coworkers and I from SF MoMA put together a show, just a virtual one, called A Year of Solitude. So I had a piece in there, and we did sort of a round robin kind of a thing via Zoom. But pretty much everybody that I had worked with at the museum had been let go during the pandemic because of the fact that, like, there weren't school groups, there weren't tours. So this whole group was just like, they're all people who really love art. Many of them were artists as well. So we did this, which was super fun. But I just realized that, like, wow, I like talking about art. I've kind of missed this, especially with that crew, because they're super, super, like, probing and asking really intelligent questions and maybe finding more meaning in your work than you are. And you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way, So that was really fun. But the first in-person show I did since the pandemic was at Cheyenne Frontier Days. They've got kind of a big group show thing. And I think it was March, maybe. I want to say March because the weather was a bear. And I was like, all right, I'm going to Cheyenne in March. Is it going to be spring or is it going to be like the longest day of winter? It was both. So I flew into Denver, rented a car and drove up to Cheyenne in a blizzard. And I was like, yep, this is Wyoming, because my dad's from Wyoming originally. So I know what I'm getting myself into. But yeah, went to Cheyenne, stayed in like a cool little motel with some bad neon, which is how I always pick my motels. But one thing you should know is, like, they're always next to railroads. Oops. I'm just awake all night as such railroad trains go by and you're like, good neon, bad acoustics. But yeah, that was a fun show. Partly just to get back out there again, California really wasn't even like that open yet, but Wyoming's a free state, so I guess we could go and socialize as we please. But it was fun to just be there again, do things and be out. I'd say maybe as a show overall, my work was probably adventurous for them, like maybe a little bit of a push, and it was maybe some of my tamer work, but it was still a little bit of a push stylistically and things. But I think it was great to get out there and kind of do stuff. Sold a little bit. That was fun. But yeah, then I went back to Denver. I did a big day at the Denver Art Museum on my way out. So, I mean, you can't even get through the whole thing in the day, but it was really exciting for me to get to know Denver a little bit more, because I think Denver's a wonderful place as far as being a kind of a small city, but like a really robust art city. Like that's a real deal museum.
Yeah.
So you got that vibe from Denver that even though it has kind of that still, even though there's been massive amounts of growth here, it still has that kind of small town feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing about Denver and Austin, I've done shows in Denver and Austin in the past year or so. And I think what I like about them is they're kind of straddling the same lines I am. Denver's like the end of the frontier or the beginning of the frontier, however you want to look at it. I did the Coors Young Guns show last December. So that's at the National Western where they hold the stock show. So, I mean, like, here we are literally physically entrenched in the cattle industry at the place where the cows went off to slaughter. Like, this is steeped in some American West stuff. My dad had even shown at the Denver stock show, like when he was young and like breeding cattle and things. So this was like more exciting for him than me getting into like the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco. Like this, he was like so excited that his daughter is showing at the stock show. And actually it was a great party. It was a great night. For those of you who aren't familiar with Young Guns, it's an organization that fosters young collectors in Western art. And it's specifically, I would say, in the kind of contemporary Western art. I don't know that that's part of their, value statement or anything as an organization, or if it's just by virtue of like young people have different looking homes and they want things that look good in the kinds of homes they live in. But super cool people from that organization. I really enjoyed like chatting with people. The people who collected my work there and I are still like friends on the internet, and they're peers really. They're kind of the next generation of collectors of this kind of art. So I had a great time. All the free beer you wanted too. That was cool. Thank you, Coors.
And you mentioned that it was a show where you really felt like you actually fit in with the group of artists that you were showing with.
Yeah, I felt like I fit in with the group of artists that I was showing with. It's cool. It felt like a good cohort, like, and it was mostly women. There was one guy. But I felt really like, okay, this is how we're going to come up together, through the rankings. And some of us do actually like keep in touch and be like, did you apply to this show? Did you get in? Kind of just having a little like shop talk privately has been nice with people who are literally in the same position as me. Because I think a lot of people interact with somebody who's either not really trying to do the same thing, or somebody whose career is so far advanced, like they're not going through the same growing pains as you. So once again, thanks to social media, I have some friends who are going through exactly the same growing pains as me. And, I'm happy for them when they have victories that I don't, like some of the shows I didn't get into, some of them did, and vice versa. So I think that it's a real sign of friendship and camaraderie when you can be happy for them when they get into the thing you didn't get into. It still hurts, but, you're happy for them.
Who are some of the artists that you connected with that you've stayed in touch with?
Yeah, well, Hannah Harper is one that I think everybody should have their eyes on. She's great. So she was part of that Young Guns show, and she's doing, I would say, kind of whimsical, almost illustration style wildlife work. So she had a really pretty fox painting, I remember there, but she's doing a lot with foxes and bears, and she lives in Oklahoma too. So she came out for the event. It was an investment for her too, and I think that's something you got to recognize is like, it's a risk to put yourself out there and go to these shows. But yeah, I've enjoyed staying in touch with her. Stephanie Hartshorn. So interesting red thread between the Cheyenne show and this show. So it's on while all the other Coors, like the club artists and whatever they call them, like the proper Coors artists, all their work is up as well. So a lot of the artists who are in that main show, the January show, were also at this event. And Stephanie Hartshorn was fun. I literally was getting out of a cab and saw some ladies trying to take a picture out front. And I was like, you ladies look like you need some help, let me take that for you. So I took her phone and I started taking pictures, and she's like, Gina? And I'm like, oh my gosh, hi. She was actually the juror in the Cheyenne show the year prior. And now here I am running into her in the parking lot at the National Western.
That's crazy.
Anyway, so we had a great time connecting that night, and she was one of the club artists, I think. So yeah, she was in the main event in January, but she was there to support that night and things. So it was really nice to kind of have this red thread kind of go through. So that was fun.
Now, are you going to be a part of that show again this year?
I'm not sure if they're doing the Young Guns thing in the same way this year. The short answer is no, but I also don't know if they're doing that kind of young collector pop-up thing this year. They've had some organizational changes over there, so I don't know. Their programming is a little different, but short answer, no.
Did you apply for the Coors show this year?
I applied for Coors proper. Yeah, that was one I screamed over the fence about. Oh, and hey, you know what? There are only so many slots every year in these things. And also, hey, maybe it's better for me to own my own backyard right now. I thought about that. My husband and I talk about this sometimes. It's like, we're in the place a lot of people fight tooth and nail to get to. I scraped by to get here. Like, there are a lot of people who really love California, and there are a lot of people in California. Let's also think about that as far as just like having an audience for your work. And where we're at's interesting too, because we're kind of on the edge of the Central Valley, and there's a lot of ag out there. Not necessarily cattle ranching, maybe cattle farmers, dairy people and things. There's a lot of dairy people in my husband's family, but people who could kind of identify with some of the subject matter that I'm painting. So maybe it's time to own my own backyard and stop trying to own yours for the moment.
Well, and people fantasize about that Western life, whether, and they could wear Levi 501s and at their corporate job. So, kind of the Steve Jobs kind of thing.
Totally. Well, and I'm pretty close to Davis, California also, which is where UC Davis is. And they've got a huge equine sciences kind of facility. Like, Davis is where you go if your horse is really in trouble. So anyway, there's a lot of horse ladies out there. Maybe I got to connect with the horse people of Davis.
There you go.
How do you go about pricing your art?
That's a good question. I think I'm getting better at valuing my time, which is a nice way of saying I'm charging more than I used to. But also I'm painting bigger. And I think there is a difference there. Not only is it just takes up more space on somebody's wall, I've got more investment in time and materials, but also, like, I think just the way you feel in front of it is different. And I know this sounds a little arbitrary, but like, how do I feel standing in front of it? What would I pay to have this experience in my own home? Like, that's part of it, is you're just like, some of these big ones really feel impactful. I'm like, yeah, that is a $10,000 painting, or like whatever it is, like when you feel like, okay, now I'm getting somewhere. So that's definitely part of it. I know that's not the perfect answer. Some of it, I think, especially for these little small work shows or things, I think of my peers, maybe the big work isn't for my peers, but for the small work shows, holiday things, that sort of stuff, like I think about like what I would pay without like blinking an eye. Like where are my, we call them sensitivity bands in marketing, but like, where are my sensitivity bands? What size versus what price feels good to me to just pull the trigger, sight unseen too. A lot of these shows are just online. So like, how much money would you spend online shopping without having touched or seen the product in person? So for some of those, yeah, especially smaller works, or I'm trying to figure out what I'd consider like a bathroom paintings. For like a bathroom painting, I'm going to charge you $800, because I know that that's a number you can stomach if you're, 30s to 40s and just starting your collection. And it's like, you like the thing or you don't like the thing,
So is that kind of the baseline of where your stuff starts at, around $800, and then goes up from there?
Yeah, for oil paintings, yes. I'm still trying to figure out a little bit of like even something a little cheaper. I kind of want to play around with like screen prints or like ink drawings or woodblock prints or something that like, especially works on paper, that I could do it like a holiday show or something and just have a rack full of them that somebody could literally walk out the door for, $150. I haven't focused much on that yet, but like I'll be doing a show around the holidays where I'm like, yeah, I want somebody to literally just be like, no brainer, take this. But I do have to consider my own time and the pricing of my other work kind of in relation. But I think that, yeah, everybody should have some no brainer work for sale if they're ever going to do a live event.
Gotcha. And everything that you offer is all original work, no prints or anything like that?
I haven't done prints yet. Once again, I think it has to do a little bit with those kind of supply and demand metrics. I just haven't had enough demand for my originals. But once again, maybe that's a price point thing. If I have some that are really cool that I get a lot of great feedback from my like peers and community about, maybe I'll consider doing a kind of small print run. Prints are kind of interesting because I don't really think that doing prints devalues the work. You look at somebody like Mark Maggiore, for example, like I can't afford one of his paintings, but I bet you there's one of his prints in every bunkhouse in America these days, like he's really figured out that volume metric. So I think it's interesting to think about accessibility too. Like if you are really trying to reach more people, how can you do that? And it doesn't have to be all like warm and fuzzy. Maybe I also just want to make some money. But some of it is about like getting your work into the hands of people who maybe couldn't afford an original. So I haven't quite figured out those metrics yet, but it's something that I'm definitely thinking about.
Yeah, I think your illustrative work really favors screen printing. I think your stuff would look beautiful screen printed.
Thank you. Yeah. And well, and once again, like maybe I actually take it to a master screen printer and they help me separate and things. Like I get spun sometimes trying to learn too many new things. Like I love woodblock. I'd love to do woodblock, but I'm like, no. Like I actually have to exercise some restraint, not introduce like too many different things in, master and none kind of thing. But there are definitely people out there who provide a separation surface and help you do screen prints. So you don't have to buy all the equipment and have a totally different studio full of all of this crap.
Yeah. Even Warhol farmed out some of his stuff.
I would be interested to see that exploration of printmaking, what you would do with it. I think that would be intriguing.
Well, I'm interested in text also, and hand doing text is always more time consuming than you think it will be. I've considered maybe screen printing text on a canvas and then painting the other part, oil painting the other part, because I do like incorporating text into certain things. So that might probably in the short term, that might be something I can do on my own and not need to, go do a run of prints per se, but literally just, stencil out some letters. And so that's probably what you'd see from me in the next year or 6 months.
So what do you do with your money when you make a big sale?
Put it under my mattress. No.
Where do you live?
Buy more stuff. I hate to say it, but literally, I'm in a privileged position in that like we're a 2-income household. I have a little bit of money from freelance work, but also like we're okay. There have been times in my life where no, I paid my bills. And right now to use the term, reinvesting the money in the business. So that's, paying for materials, that's paying for professional development. I take workshops all the time, just from all sorts of people doing different things, not always painting workshops. I've taken some like marketing workshops before from this lady, Robin Sembalest, who's great. She was the editor of Art News years ago. And she does workshops for artists, like how to speak about your work, how to write an artist statement, how to pitch press, those kind of things. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a worthy investment of my, income.
You do any other kind of marketing outside of your social media, Instagram, and then your website?
Personally, I can't afford to do paid marketing, and I don't believe in it. Not that it's bad or awful or whatever. I just think that we're so oversaturated, it doesn't reach the right eyes, and the ROI is bad, really bad. So I'm focusing right now on earned media, which also takes a lot of time and some investment if you want to work with a publicist, or you need to go pay a photographer and get some new headshots. Or also, to every single artist out there, if you're working with a Sears portrait from the 80s, get a new headshot. I'm sorry if you got that thing on some like crinkly background that was like taupe or blue. Get a new headshot. But you do have to invest in your business. So I think earned media is probably my number one focus there, partly because I think it will help me get, brand collaborations and other things. And, eyeballs. Honestly, visibility matters. It's a visual sport. Being seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So you do writing. And I read your piece in Cowboys and Indians. Really well done. It was a beautiful piece. Read some of your other shorter pieces as well. How did you get into that gig?
Yeah, once again, I think being an artist means you need odd jobs, right? Like it's one of those that's also asynchronous a little bit. I do have to schedule times to go on an assignment I do a lot of remote interviews now. So I can still kind of work that around my own schedule, which is great. I don't have to clock in on like a daily. But yeah, I had a writing background before, probably a little bit more like romantic, like teen girl poetry kind of stuff or whatever. But I really found that I like narrative nonfiction. I like interviewing people. I like kind of having that grounded in somebody else's experience, and being able to share their story is fun. So currently I'm writing for a couple of art magazines. So one of the things that's kind of fun about that is like my Venn diagrams just got a lot closer, like I am actually talking about art for a living. Wow, this is a new thing, So I've interviewed people for maybe 10 years or so, but I've really honed in on kind of art and music and design industry kind of people over the past few years. And once again, being part of a community, like I'm literally like creating relationships with people. I'm hearing about their practice, the hurdles they've overcome, the victories they're having, what they're doing next. Some of the conceptual stuff behind their work occasionally. So that's been really fun for me, kind of being on an island out here. I don't go to town very often. Like I feel like part of something. So that's been a real gift, I think, just to, be able to talk to people from here and in a pretty meaningful way too.
And educational, right? Like it's an education when you get to experience all that and talk with other people.
Yeah. And if, a lot of people are into like how I made this or something like that, right? If you're in business, you want to hear case studies. The more artists I talk to, the more patterns I start to recognize and like where a turning point was in their career, what kind of ways did they deal with setbacks, all these kind of things. It's only informing what I do going forward.
I want to pull up one more piece. Let's talk about this piece real quick, because this is part of the newer work that you're really excited about.
Yeah, this is also for that show in Santa Monica called Witches, which was funny. When I got invited to the show, it's like, okay, so here's some strangers who've been following me on Instagram and like, hey, we're doing a witch themed show and we thought you'd be good for it. And I think we live in a time and place where that's a compliment, but it wasn't always, right? Like it was a taunt on the playground to call somebody a witch, or, it could get you killed in another century. But I think that in this sort of like backyard mystic, we all listen to astrologers kind of time we live in, I'm like, yeah, I'm a witch. Yeah. But when it came time to actually think of like, how is this like truly going to manifest? What do I actually want to do? I'm not going to paint like a lady with a green face and a wart. This is a friend of mine that I've actually painted many times. I think she's probably my most painted model because I think she just has such beautiful features. But she owns a snake. She owns a ball python. And for maybe about a year, we've been talking about like shooting with this snake. And I'm like, yeah, man, I really want to paint you with a snake. I don't know what for or when or why. And I think, she'd probably have to speak for herself on what brand of witch she is, but I think personally she identifies a little bit as a witch as well. So it was a perfect fit of like, okay, this one's been on the like back burner for like a year at least. I've been wanting to paint her with her snake, and now I've got this opportunity. I'm in LA. LA is ready for this, like plenty, like Cheyenne probably not ready for this. Just saying that. Sorry, Cheyenne, you're not ready for this. LA is ready for this. So I really was able to like kind of go back through these ideas I've been thinking of and be like, oh yeah, okay, now is time for this. So I drove down to San Francisco and we did a shoot just like in her apartment with like a sheet pinned up, she got the snake out. He kind of wrapped around her head in this cool way. And I was like, okay, we got this. But I'm calling this one ad vivum, which is a Latin term that basically means living or to life or something, to me, it's interesting because there's a lot of different connotations to being a witch. But in a lot of cultures, like a witch is a healer. A witch would have been a medicine woman or a doula, or, like witch isn't always a bad thing. And I just thought that her pose and her energy and the snake in general, the snake is living. The place where she buys snake food is called the vivarium, which also has to do with living things being there. It shares a root word with vivacious. So, like all these things, I was like, oh, I like this. Yeah. So that's kind of how this one came about.
And the repeat of the black square.
Yes.
Yeah.
So talk about black squares.
It's interesting because as I've put these on social media, I've gotten some good feedback from like artist community and things. And some of them have said like, oh yeah, the black square is really masculine. That's really interesting, kind of pairing it with the feminine shapes of the woman and the snake and the, that kind of energy. And for me, the black square is interesting because it kind of also could represent like a void or something. If you really wanted to look at it as purely as a graphic element, I use squares and borders a lot, partly just so I can break them. It's an old technique they did in illustration in the 30s and 20s, but also like maybe there's a little bit of a transgressive nature is that like, you can't put me in a box. I'm going to break out of it. I cross this line or something. So I've enjoyed doing that with graphic elements, back to the Boot Hill one that we looked at earlier. She becomes that background, then she breaks free of it a couple times. So I kind of like that interplay.
Yeah, this is a beautiful piece. It's well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love her expression.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a great model. I've like, and honestly, I got to give her a shout out. Thank you for letting me paint you when I was a sucky painter. I've been painting her since art school and they've been hit and miss. She's volunteered to model for me when I was not a very good painter.
It's nice to have that kind of collaboration with somebody close, right?
Yeah, well, and she's a real model. We met each other when we were at Ford. She was with Ford also. But she's also a dancer. So the way she moves on camera and uses her arms and her hands and things was really interesting. And I think I like working with dancers. I've painted a lot of dancers because I like the way they move and the negative shapes they make with their limbs. Like they're more aware of their body and the forms they, cast, I guess.
What kind of books and magazines do you read?
I stack most of them up more than I read them.
I belong to that club too.
It's kind of a trap, because you want to be in the know and you want to subscribe to all of them, but then you can't always like get through every single one. I would say I really appreciate Art News and Art Forum just for like, all right, here's what's going on in the big boy art world, and not to like segment them or kind of like, be pejorative to the more like cottage industry side of the art world. But I think it's really important for me to keep a foot in like true contemporary art. Since I am not at the museum anymore, I'm not as like hip to what's going on in the like greater art world. I've kind of taken a little bit more time and interest in this sort of like figurative realism or, Western American art. But honestly, they're pretty niche industries. So the magazines that I work for actually are kind of like right in that spot. So I end up, meeting a lot of people who are doing that kind of work and having, interesting discussions with them. But yeah, books, oh man, I'm all over the place. Back to like, science fiction. I was a big fan of Dune. I'm very excited for the new Dune coming out too. But I like shredded through the Dune series one summer, just like, I don't know, like maybe 2 weeks, just read all of them.
That's a feat.
It was fun. It was fun for sure.
So did you like the newest Dune movie? And I'm excited
yeah.
about the new one coming out too, but
Yes, I thought it was absolutely amazing. And I think a lot of people were a little let down that it didn't get anywhere story-wise, but there's so much world building that needed to happen for you to like care about these characters. And it was so visually stimulating, the sound engineering and the soundtrack, like, whoa. So I think that it was definitely building up to whatever's going to happen. I think it comes out in November, maybe the next one. So we're really going to get more like plot action going on. But yeah, I loved it. And also, if anybody read the original Dune, it took me a week to get through the first 300 pages of it and all this world building, and I almost gave up. And as soon as stuff started happening, I realized I care about all these people. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen to them? So thanks, Frank Herbert, for breadcrumbing me all the way along. I stayed, and then I really like just flew through it after that.
Did you watch the original movie with Sting?
Where are my feelings?
I saw when it came out, so that tells you something. But it was
so
interesting
bad.
in its day. But yeah, it doesn't hold up, does it?
So bad. Well, and I love David Lynch too. But David Lynch didn't love that film, and neither did I.
I forgot he did that one, didn't he?
I think he took his name off of it or something. There was a little bit of like scandal around it. But I love David Lynch. Back to like some of the kind of people that really embody these like, mysterious, moody women in their work. Like, yeah, David Lynch was definitely an influence.
Yeah. Interesting.
what is your greatest extravagance?
Ooh, my greatest extravagance is not having a full-time job right now.
That's nice.
And it's great. I mean, honestly, it's great. I don't remember the last time I had so much autonomy, and really being able to like, okay, if I want to sit down and paint for 12 hours, and sometimes I do, like, especially when I'm starting paintings, sometimes you just like the mojo's going, or you've got this whole area that's wet and workable and you don't want to give up on it and like let it set, because then, certain parts won't be workable again for a couple days. So the ability to just go on a bender, I literally can like get off this call tonight and paint till 3 a.m. if I want to. And I think that's pretty awesome.
On what occasion do you lie?
Oh, where did that come from? Wow.
When people ask me if I like their work. No, I do my best not to be overly flattering of work that I don't like. But I think I can still have a good conversation with somebody, even if it's not my jam, because it takes all types, right? I'm never going to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't make. But if I'm interviewing somebody or just engaging with somebody at a show about their work, I can talk to them about other parts of the work. I can talk to them about like what their daily practice looks like or what their inspiration was. But like, I don't think you have to say lies to people in order to enjoy being part of their, whatever their moment is, whether that's that show or something. My friend Karina was saying, like, she's a dancer also, but she said, I really just long for the day where you could get up during a performance and leave if you didn't like it. She's like, the world would be a lot more honest place. So I'm not going to get up and leave your art show if I don't like it. But I am pretty good about not being overly flattering of somebody if I'm like, this isn't quite my jam. But I could lie if I had to.
Anything else you want to talk about or promote that you have coming up? I know we have these 2 shows. Yeah. You can mention those again, but anything else between now and the end of the year or even into the beginning of next year you want to talk about?
Yeah, I would say I'll just give a little quick shout out for these shows. New History is at Blue Stream Gallery in San Francisco, opening September 2nd. And then Witches is opening October 13th in Santa Monica. So those are kind of my 2 big things on my plate right now. Otherwise, I'm working on some commercial projects. I'm doing like a rodeo poster next week, just a few little one-off things here and there to kind of, keep things going from an economic standpoint as well. But yeah, those are my 2 big like art with a capital A shows coming up.
Hey, I got one last question because Chat GPT wants to know, what are your thoughts on the relationship between art and society?
Oh, art and society. I thought you were going to ask me art and AI. Art and society is interesting. I listened to an interview recently at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco that talked about like your brain on art. And they literally were talking about like the physical things that transpire in your body when you observe art. And I thought it was so interesting that art can be healing, it can be stimulating, it can be inflammatory if you see something that you don't appreciate. But to me, I think that the most important thing is knowing that it's a creating inputs, right? Like, and I think that we're so used to being, I don't know, fed things that the machine thinks we'll like or blah, blah, blah. Like sometimes it's good to be challenged. And I think that art can be challenging in constructive ways. It doesn't always have to be antagonizing. I think that it can open your mind. It can change your mind. And I think that that's really important to, remember going forward as a creator of art and a consumer of art, is that like, I'm not always right. I mean, I'd love to be always right, but like, there's also a lot of things that don't have a right answer. And I think that my favorite artists are ambiguous. They pose a question, but they don't give you the answer. So I think that's something I aspire to in my own practice, is to ask more questions and get people thinking.
Oh, I love that. That's a great answer. Fantastic. So Gina, this has been wonderful. I love your stuff. I'm going to be following you. I'm excited to see what comes down the road for you, and I'll be doing some checking in on your career and how things are going. But you have some amazing stuff, and this has been absolutely a joy to sit down with you and spend this time with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Wes. I appreciate your time too. You guys were fun.
I have one last question for you, Gina, and that is, do you have a mantra or motto that you live by?
I learned this from tech, of one of my many odd jobs. I've worked at a startup before. Fail fast.
Fail fast. That's awesome. I love that. Right on. Thank you so much for your willingness to come on the podcast, reaching out, because you did reach out to me. So I always appreciate, and if you're listening to this episode, feel free to reach out to us. We try to keep our eyes and ears open, but you never know. And I'm always looking for people to get on the podcast. So don't be shy. Gina is one of those people, and I appreciate it when an artist takes the initiative. And we just had to wait for the right timing, and the stars aligned, and we were able to get you on today. So I really appreciate your time, taking time on a Sunday away from your husband and spending it with us and talking about your practice and the work. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure you counted as one of my awkward emails that day. So thanks for reciprocating. It's less awkward when you hear back. Todd, Wes, you guys have been amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Again, remember to follow Gina on Instagram at Gina Teichert. And you can check out Gina's work at her website, ginateichert.com. And you can catch Gina's work in person at these upcoming exhibitions. If you're in San Francisco, see her work at Blue Stream Gallery. She will be part of the Beginning New History and Artistic Growth exhibition that runs from August 31st through September 13th. And October 13th through the 28th, she will be part of the group exhibition Witches at Dorado 806 Projects in Santa Monica, California. You can find all this information and more in this week's episode notes. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.